strong start. Black will need to score here, and we see Magnus essaying a very interesting opening here with f6, knight h6, knight f7. So he's just going to try and have fun and play some unusual variations, and we'll see what Rasmus does against this. Black now has these pawns on e5 and f5. They can be a little bit weak, but on the other hand, as Black, you're quite happy that you've got a space advantage in the center. Black's already going for an aggressive variation, f4, pressing in the center. Will we see f3? At some point, grabbing more space and kicking the bishop back. Knight g5, a very strong move. Has this been missed by Magnus? Magnus gives an exchange, and Rasmus actually in great shape. He picks up a pawn. Rasmus in the center. Magnus picks up a pawn in exchange on a2. We see rook d8. Knight e2 check is the threat here with the x-ray on the rook on d1. And Rasmus sidesteps this. Bishop f7, preventing rook e8, probably wanting to keep the rooks on the board if possible. Rook b8, Magnus has to go passive. Rook d7, we're looking at rook e7, knight on f5, stops that. Bishop e4, trying to kick that. Lots of tactics. Rook e8, rook on e1 is now defended after king f1, but will we see bishop c4 check or anything like this? I think bishop d3 is there. Magnus's biggest advantage is he's got time on the clock, but bishop takes h7, nice tactic. If you take the bishop, the rook on e8 would hang, and this is excellent from Rasmus. Fantastic game so far. And in fact, Magnus is in serious trouble. He's got a completely lost endgame and he resigns. So that's a huge game. These are short matches. We're looking at the first person to 6.5. And Magnus whipping out the moves here. H5, a very interesting move. Magnus certainly feels confident in the endgames. He's known as maybe the best player of all time, perhaps. But certainly his name is up there when it comes to best endgame player of all time as well. So he's taking the game to an endgame. We're seeing bishop e3 and b4 trying to push back those knights. The knight on a6 is not looking really ideal here. We're seeing knight d2 completing the development. I like Magnus's position. We might see a break with pawn to a5 at some point soon. But Magnus, for the first time going into the tank, one thing that's interesting about his German opponent, he's keeping very, very well, doing very well on the clock against him. The a file has opened up. That's in white's favor. Pressure on b6 pawn. Now we're seeing pawn to b5, and that's it. That's going to be game over. The knight is lost. You could not move it without losing the rook on a8. Rasmus is continuing to play. Why not? This is bullet. But against Magnus, it's unlikely to work. We'll see what happens soon. Magnus playing f5, grabbing space and also opening up lines, and importantly, kicking the knight back from the defensive c5. Knight repositions to e4. We're seeing defensive g3 and pressure on f6. That's an extra piece we can take on f6 with check. Magnus does not go for that, but there are various ways to convert this. He's just going to push the queenside pawn, advance the king, maybe king b5, advancing further, and pawn to c6, I expect. No, he goes for the greedy option, grabbing the pawn. Why not? Black's only counterplay is this pawn on e4, but the knight on f3 controls that square. Knight h3, knight f4 check. We're going to see the pawn drop, and Magnus actually just swaps off everything, and as in the first game, liquidates into a winning queen and pawn again. But wait a second. Magnus came very, very close there to losing control. Maybe unnecessary what he allowed there, but it was actually always just by one tempo, but always actually ultimately in control. So that's 2-1. And so far we've seen the white player win each and every time in these first three games.
Guys, apologies. We're gonna stick, I believe, to just Magnus's camera. For the next matches, there will be more time to figure this out, but not as easy as I thought on the fly. But here is Magnus, and hopefully people are happy to see the king. So, sorry, back to the chess, Alex.
No problem. So here we're seeing that Black seems to have gotten a very, very nice position here. We're seeing already up a pawn, and in addition to being up a pawn, Black's position is just beautiful here. The bishop on g2 is crashing into nothing. He's got more space. Definitely white is really up against this. f5 and f4 is already problems for this rook on c3. Threatening a pawn, but Magnus isn't concerned. Queen g3 ideas are going to immediately threaten queen h2, followed up by ideas like bishop g3. That's why white sacrifices an exchange here on d6. We're seeing Magnus continuing the attack. Bishop takes h3 is possible, and after bishop f2 you can keep the pressure on, or you can just liquidate into an endgame. Magnus deciding to keep the pressure on. He might go for a check. Now ultimately he exchanges everything. We're seeing a4 and rook c8. Very hard to defend this pawn, so you're down in exchange and you're down material. Rook c3 going for the a3 pawn. We're going to see this pawn on a4 drop very soon. King takes f4, not possible because of g5, and that was brutal. Magnus winning a crucial game there. Rasmus needed to win in order to equalize the match. Now he's up against a 3-1 Magnus with the white pieces.
Yeah, a strong start from the world champion, who today will be looking, and I think we lost his camera. Okay, Alex, I'll let you take care of the game.
We're flying
again.
free once again without the mouse. So we've got seven pawns each so far, and Magnus is putting the pressure into in the center. I really like Magnus's position. He's castling into a somewhat open king with those pawns advanced, but it's no big deal. He's got the bishop on g2, he's got the queen on f3. The knight on h5 isn't really playing for now. Black goes queen b6 for some pressure on the queen side, bishop e5, tying in with that, but the center falls with the pawn on d5. We see the pawn on f2 under fire. Knight g3, a nice tactic. Did Magnus miss that tactic? My impression is he did. Now the bishop takes f2, the pawn drops, the knight is defended, the knight goes back, and now this knight is going to be much more active. Queen c7 threats, and this is not a situation that you want. Rook e3, huge move there. Queen takes e3, are we going to see some knight f4? But Magnus calls his bluff. He says, in fact, there isn't anything here, you just gave up an exchange, maybe you have a draw, but you're not going to be able to do more than that. On the other hand, actually, the problem with king h3 was knight f4 check was coming in, and in fact, turns out Rasmus says, I did have more than that. That's a huge result. 3-2. A convincing win with the black pieces, and Rasmus showing that he can hang with the world number one.
Absolutely. Very impressive start from Rasmus. Rasmus, actually, the reason he is up against Magnus Carlsen, the pairing system, the knockout bracket was done based on their standings in the qualifiers, and Rasmus qualified with the lowest score out of everyone. That's why he got the chance, or the man chance, to be up against Magnus, but definitely holding his own so far. Yeah,
incredible stuff, and in this position here, Magnus will be happy. I think he's got that queenside pawn majority. He's got more space, but for the time being, it's not. White is also in the game. On the other hand, you know, when you have the white pieces, you have that added pressure. Black might go g6. He's not concerned about any sacrifices. Bishop c4. The queen is now going to have to be passive in order to defend this. Instead, he offers bishop d3. We don't see an exchange. Maybe we're going to see queen d5 piling on the pressure here, and white has to go passive. On the other hand, that bishop is still influential along this diagonal. We're seeing queen takes d4. Black broke with b4, breaking up that queenside structure, and I think Magnus is really putting the pressure in this particular variation. Can we see something like g5, or will he consider that a bit too risky? Magnus is going to the tank. Queen f5 ideas would then threaten checkmate. It's hard to say. He does go for g5. The question is, what is he going to do here? He moves the bishop, preparing queen check. Will be met by king f8. But this is somewhat risky territory. Will he, for example, give a check here with the queen on d1? He wants those queens off the board. Will white grab this pawn? The problem is queen check, and the bishop will fall. On the other hand, bishop here, we're seeing queen h7 check, accelerating, preventing everything. We might see bishop f8 just consolidating and block with the queen on g6, queen e5. Magnus desperately, he's up a piece, desperately wants to exchange. He succeeds. Bishop d5, queen e4 is coming in. Best case scenario for white, apart from the clock situation, is a draw by repetition. That's what he's going for with the queen, but Magnus's king will escape, and now the queen's come off the board. King f5, queen even stays. It's all about the clock situation. Magnus is under pressure, but will he checkmate? I believe he will. Let's see it. It's 1 second.
He doesn't get there.
That could be huge, and we see Magnus. He's not particularly happy.
My apologies, guys. I don't know why the Zoom call keeps jumping around. I'll try and fix it while I let you keep looking at the games, Alex.
Yeah, so in this game now, Magnus keeps, in spite of that result, he keeps a convincing 2-game lead. We're 3.5 against 2.5, a 1-game lead. And yeah, the question is, what will happen in this particular game here? It's pretty close. Black, on the other hand, white has, Magnus has the white pieces, queen e4, huge move. You're threatening mate on h7 and the bishop on d4. He goes in a different direction. Here, rook to d1, queen f5, we're seeing queen h7 is not a threat, but the knight on f6 is tied down. King h2, trying to fix the king problems. Maybe we'll see some rook to e1, offering 2 rooks for the queen. Black goes for that, but the rook on c8. The rook on c8 was hanging with check, not taken. That's a huge miss from Magnus, as far as I can tell, unless there was something there, but I don't believe so. White now goes bishop c2, trying to reroute that bishop to b3. And we're seeing black is hanging on, but the huge threat of checkmate here with queen to h8. What will black do? Black goes rook e8, but we've got queen g8, and the pawn on g7 drops. The pawn on g6 is very, very strong. the white queen and the bishop should combine very well, and that is actually going to be a queen here, costing an exchange. Black is going to try to hang on, but the big problem is this G pawn here. What can you do to stop it and to prevent it costing you more material? Black is trying, but that's it. It's going to be game over. That's a second queen on the board. Resign time. That's a monster game. We're seeing 4.5, 2.5, and Magnus is potentially just 2 games away from victory.
There is so much happening in the early stages. We have the Magnus comeback. Also, we should say the format is it's a best of 12 games, which means that Magnus is now 2 points away from the magical 6.5 points mark. 2 points away from qualifying to the quarterfinals. Also, this stress situation will only be for the first rounds. From the quarterfinals, there will be one match after another. They will not play simultaneously. So good news for you guys and for us as well.
So for this particular game here, we're seeing Rasmus is really up against it, and we're seeing a very similar position to b4 with the light square bishops off the board. That means black has no real problems about getting checkmated. But on the other hand, I like white's activity. Rook f7 is a kind of a way to offer a draw here. If white goes back, will black go rook f7, or will he push his luck with queen f7?
And white feels like he has to play on.
Yeah, Rasmus is indicating no draw here, and that makes sense because the black king looks a lot less safe than the white king. Black again seeking that exchange of the queens, and rook e7 a nice touch when you exchange. This pawn on c6 drops though. You cannot take here because there was a checkmate on e8, very quickly spotted by the players. Queen e4. Now Magnus is the one trying to force a perpetual, and in this case white says still no thank you to that. White has some checks. He goes instead in a different direction, and that allows the perpetual. So that's a good result, good practical result. Absolutely. For Magnus.
Now 1.5 point away. There was a question in the chat, what happens if it's tied 6-6? They will draw colors and then they will play until one person wins one game. So that's the way it will work. Okay, so Magnus now 1.5.
I'm loving Magnus's position here.
Me too.
He's got a lot of pressure. Maybe at some point he can get g4, g5 in. Rook here inviting e5 ideas, but I think the point is knight b5, the queen would be hanging, so you can escape the x-ray. Now e5 is played, but with the bishop here it's not a big deal. The queen is not being x-rayed. We're going to see white having to move his queen. He goes for queen e3.
Maybe some knight h6 in the air at some point.
For sure. Maybe he'll keep the rooks. He goes in a different direction. Full board vision, but black is attacking both pieces. Will we see a retreat of the knight or bishop to c2? This move is very, very awkward for white to deal with. He goes for bishop c2. Now the bishops come off, queen d1 is prevented, queen d2 can invade, but white actually suddenly very dominant, very much in control here. He could go for a repetition, he had the option, but he didn't go for that. He went for queen c2. Magnus wants to almost end the match with this particular game, and he's in great shape. He's up 2 pawns.
Absolutely. One win here will take him very, very close. He is pushing, but I'm curious if he has... I'm still curious about that game where he didn't manage to win with the queen, where he didn't manage to checkmate in time. Because Magnus, we have seen him before. He really has the speed usually. Apparently Penguin is already through, very impressive. And let's see, as soon as this match is over, we'll update you on the other results.
Desperation there, and very, very nice conversion there from Magnus. And 6-3. This is an absolute must-win situation for Rasmus, not where you want to be. Although Magnus is taking some liberties in the opening here. He's toying a little bit with his opponent perhaps, because this is not what you usually want to do. And look at where the king is. The king and queen do not start like this.
Where is that king going?
He's gone for like the bomb cloud. He went for some kind of bomb cloud here, and this is simply incredible for Magnus, who keeps a straight face, but not quite what you want potentially your final game to be. So let's see, can Rasmus punish the liberties that the world champion is taking?
Apparently Oberwesen is true as well, which is a huge result for him. We'll update all the results. Magnus only needs a draw here. Took some liberties in the opening, but looks like he got away with it.
He's setting up a fortress here of sorts for the man who said he does not believe in fortresses.
My apologies, guys. We're gonna have to look at the end of this match. The problem with the Zoom call, if you have used Zoom, people are coming and leaving, and it makes our job quite difficult. So let's see, after this match, there shall be no more issues. Apology about that. And let's look at this final game. Yeah,
black I think is actually in great shape here. The position is completely closed, and white almost wants Black to take this pawn so that he can generate some activity on the A file. But Black is now in.
Oh, that's a big
huge mouse slip! Huge mouse slip and immediate resignation. Will that spell the difference? Magnus, with he was in cruise control.
Such a pity we lost the camera at the worst possible time. Let's try and bring it back for the last. Let's try and bring Magnus back for the last game.
That is the one thing that could have saved Rasmus in that particular game, and it happened. Magnus will need to recover here. He's got the white pieces though, and of course, you know, when you're used to playing chess at the absolute highest levels, I don't think that that Magnus is going to be too fazed by something like that.
Absolutely. We almost had him, but then the camera jumped again. It's so close. How's the game going?
So Magnus seems to be in a nice position here with a really strong knight on d6. That's actually, the position has now changed. The white knights have shifted to b3 and c4, back onto d6, using all of these squares. Black is on the defensive. Again, white has a bunch of extra space. The one thing that black might use in this position, though, the bishop on a7 is quite strong. And we wonder, can you not take on e5, collapse the center, and now the position is getting very, very messy. Those knights looking for stability. Black is the one finally here with a better center. But on the other hand, this pawn on g5 can fall at any moment, and white is going to have two passed pawns. Black is rolling up the board with c4, but rook check, and rook check picks up the rook. And I think that this is going to be it. Yes, you have these two pawns, but white should be able to blockade them. And importantly, white has this pawn. He's making already a queen here. And I think we're just going to see Magnus converting in a variety of ways. He goes for the more practical choice. Doesn't even want to let black promote. d3 is not an option. The d3 square is super well covered here. And white now is shifting. He just has to make sure no more mouse slips. Rook takes c2. That's one pawn gone. e4, you can take that one as well. You can take d4 on the next one with check. You can even exchange everything. Game over. And match over. Magnus goes through.
Magnus does not look too impressed. We will leave the camp for now. But let's see who else is still playing. Where can we go? Mulspark, let's go there. So Mulspark is Grandmaster Rauf Mamedov, and he's playing against Arjun Argaisi from India, and he's apparently only a draw.
We might even consider some rook f1 checks, some knight takes d5, a lot of tactical possibilities here in the position. Queen g8. The king will continue to run to d6, but the question is, how far will that king run? White is already threatening checkmate here on d8. That would be huge. Black stops this, creating threats of his own against the white king, but the white king should be safe. The pawn on d5 drops. We might even see, huge move. You cannot take here because of rook d8, but this is a huge move in return. King f1 in order to prevent rook e1 ideas. If you went to h2, the problem was this knight would fall with check. So king f1 is a beautiful move. I don't see anything for black, and that's going to be game over with that extra piece and the attack. And that's it. It's mate in one. Queen d6 is the only way to deal with the check.
And that means that Mulspark Rauf Mamedov is through. There is still, I guess, one match going on. No, Alireza, they are still playing, but I think Alireza is true. Maybe they did not realize. I think we'll move on for here. Alireza seems to have scored 7 points.
Alireza just showing his love of the game.
Shant against Josef. This one is a close one. And our international master, Josef Tahir from Indonesia, is one win away from pulling off a fantastic upset against Shant Sargsyan from Armenia.
Huge. So we're now looking at it from Shant's perspective, meaning that he needs to avoid a loss here in this particular game, and really he wants to win. He's got the white pieces. This is a battle, maybe the closest battle with that fourth victory. Bishop e2, hoping for the exchange of these bishops. That would be beneficial because the knight would on d5 would sort of outclass this bishop. Again, aiming for that exchange. Black is not going to accommodate it. You can go knight d5, but sooner or later I will harass you. Queen d3, allowing black to exchange the not so good bishop. White's position is still very good here because even though he's down a pawn, the pawn doesn't really play. In fact, you could already take and recover that pawn. That's what he goes for. But on the other hand, is it going to be more than enough? Oh! Queen f8 was missed with checkmate. Queen f8 missed, and I've left you deaf. I apologize. That was huge. That's 2 huge misses. The question is Shant feeling the pressure? He had the option to take the rook, and in the end, sorry guys to the chat for anyone whose eardrums are in pain. That was a very, very, very big game.
And that means Josef, with the white pieces, only needs a draw to go through. However, if Shant can win, we will see our first playoff of the day. It will be tied 6-6, so one way or another we'll find out after this game.
Incredible. Black, absolute clutch situation here. If he wants to stay in the game, he needs to win on demand with the black pieces. That's always difficult to do, although bullet chess is one of the more forgiving formats, right? Because if you're in classical chess, you're facing someone like Fabiano Caruana, you're in serious trouble if you need to win on demand with black. But here you also have, sorry, my apologies. That is my, no, yes, correct. The
excitement is too much.
Yeah, it's honest, but it's super interesting stuff happening here. B4 though, the pawn is dropping. I'm a little bit surprised by that. I think it was a mouse slip. I think it was a mouse slip, but this is a mistake, I think. Oh no, it is not a mistake. White goes for F4. He has given up a pawn. But on the other hand, the pawns are crippled here. Black maybe looking to place the king on e6, but that's not much of a defense. White wants to double up the rooks. e4 already offering up that pawn. The problem is you need to win this position.
Youssef is so fast, I have to say. I wasn't too familiar with him until the qualifiers, but I've been very impressed with what I've seen.
It's going to take nothing short of a miracle here in order to be able to win this, because you're down a pawn, you have a worse pawn structure, and, you know, your opponent also has 8 seconds on the clock, which is this level.
He's making progress though. That pawn has already landed on the 3rd rank. Time could be an issue as well here.
A4 is a very nice idea as well, trying to chip away at this structure, and now he's probably sooner or later going to try to put the rook on b8 or a3. He goes instead for this pawn. King c3 will chase this pawn down, but he prefers to defend this pawn. Now rook d3. How does white defend this pawn? He goes for rook c4, rook d4. I'm surprised by that because 2 rooks come off the board. Threats of mate in certain positions, but Youssef with the check prevents it. You can draw here, but it's not enough, so that's why he goes e2. He wants king e3. Threat of mate, but Youssef will probably just check forever. King f4, the only way, but now there's no mating pattern. It's all about the clock. And the rook falls, and I think that's it. Youssef, incredibly fast player. We're not going to see any chance here for Shant. And will he regret that? Well, he does regret that miss, those couple of misses in the previous game, but a huge comeback winning 3 in a row.
Incredible. So let's see if we can find the results. By the way, all the information Never mind, we are back. I thought there was going to be a short break, but no, Rauf and Magnus are off. Alex will start taking you through it while I try and get the player cameras.
So, in this first position here, we've got Mamedov with the black piece and Magnus with the white pieces. He's an extra pawn here, pawn to the good. In these kind of structures though, but the biggest difference is he's down in exchange. So actually Magnus is maybe able to hold. The position might be just about tenable, but black is the one pressing here for sure. He goes knight f6. That's a very aggressive move. He grabs the pawn on h7, but black is probably going to have some counterplay against those queenside pawns. Knight on e5 hits the pawn on d3. And the question is, what are you going to do about that pawn? King does drop back to e7. So it seems to be... well, now the board has been updated. Sorry guys, I cannot actually see the board at times when the Zoom call is being adjusted. That's hence the reason for, bishop f1 offering the exchange here, but the pawn on h6 is huge here. Black is going to be tied down to the defense of that pawn. On the other hand, white's king cannot break in, so what we're going to see is a potential draw here with the repetition, or Magnus is going to press for the clock situation. Objectively it's equal, but Magnus is the one pressing. He's got 6 seconds against just under 1, so I think that's going to be it. We're not going to see any kind of trades, and we see Magnus with that squeeze on the clock. Nothing to be done. Sorry guys about the somewhat messy start to this particular game. We will we will improve the situation as the stream goes. It's been a chaotic start. Here we see Magnus playing the same variation of the Caro-Kann that Grandmaster Rasmus essayed against him in his first match. And this is a very typical situation in this exciting variation. We've got opposite side castle, bishop c7, seeking to keep the knight, but also queen on d5 will attack, bishop e4, preventing that. Whoa, tactics. Bishop takes, king takes, queen e6, picking up this bishop. But d5 means that at the end the pawn on c6 drops, black goes after this pawn, he'll probably take it, but he cannot because knight e7 check will be huge, that's why he goes bishop takes h2. Still Magnus cannot take this. He can, however, collect Magnus's exchange here. The question is this pawn worth more than an exchange? Bishop b6 is an option. However, the problem was in the first move you couldn't go back. You could have stopped that with bishop c7, hence f4. And the question is, will this bishop survive? We might see rook h1. The pawn on f4 is defended, but this bishop is hit. And in fact, excellent way of navigating the complications by Magnus. And Magnus is now actually up. He's up in exchange, but that knight on d4 was very strong. It was hitting these pawns, so we're now going into a rook and pawn endgame, and white resigns because it was a very favorable one. All the pawns were falling.
Magnus off to a 2-0 start against Ralph, who will have to bounce back very, very soon.
That's huge. You have to feel a little bit for Ralph, who had great positions, but somehow the world champion, he showed his class in both of them. Here we're seeing a very nice position, and this is trouble because if you take on c3, we see this attack, and after e5 the black knight goes back, but white has gained some extra tempo. Knight f4 hitting the rook and hitting the pawn. Ralph Mamedov is in a lot of trouble. e6, he's not even interested. He gives up this pawn, but the idea is he wants to break up the structure and get at the black king here. g6 falls, and you're going to see more pressure on e6. Black and white continues to not care about this pawn. Knight takes e6. The king on c8 has had to just run away from the king's side. We see bishop e3. Probably looking for rook c1. Black trying to find some chances to survive with his king, but black just resigns. That seems a little bit...
I'm surprised that Ralph is not fighting on a bit more.
Yeah, it seemed a little bit premature, but I think that the reason was because if you went king b7, there was a tactic with rook takes f6. It was really a crushing tactic, but I think the players are seeing it so quickly that it's very hard to react in time.
So Magnus 3-0. 3-0 to Magnus. We've seen him so far. We haven't seen anything of what he did against Rasmus, of playing the wrong cloud or whatever he was up to. He means business.
Oh, queen is dropped. Queen has dropped on e6. Magnus had pre-moved f6, and Ralph with a very important win there.
Yeah, very important to get into the match. His first point. So now just trailing by 2, and I mean at this bullet, anything can happen. I think in bullet, if you get into a run, you can absolutely score a few wins in a row.
Yeah, and here we're seeing King's Indian defense. Magnus is going for it here. Very nice position, I think. Black is sort of shut down in the King's Indian. You often want to break with f5. Now that square belongs to white, and d takes c6. There are problems here with the backward pawn on d6. White is castling into these advanced pawns. He doesn't really care. Now when you take everything, bishop f3, I don't see a solution against this, because if you go f5, you're just going to take. Has Ralph Mamedov dropped the piece? As far as I can tell, he has. And he's going into the tank, which tells you a bad story. He continues. He decides to sacrifice his knight for a couple of pawns on f2 and c4. There are some chances, but the white pieces are too strong here. And after bishop here, I don't even see a way to escape with the queen, and we're going to see a resignation. So Magnus picking up a win in 22 moves, 4-1. So far, very, very dominant performance.
Very impressive stuff. I have just sent one of my dear mods the brackets so that you people... I'm sorry, I'm not sure. I don't think they were published, but someone will put them in the chat very, very soon. So remember, Magnus and Ralph are the only ones playing for now. After that, we will see the next quarterfinal and the next and the next, and they will be in the chat very soon.
And this is looking like it's going to go from bad to worse here for Mamedov. He's down in exchange, and I don't see quite enough compensation for it. He has one pawn. That's usually not enough. h6, however, you can potentially, you can maybe take here rook takes and knight e6. I think maybe that's what Mamedov is calculating. He sees something that we haven't. I'm sure that Magnus had also seen something that neither player captures there. Rook f5, chasing after the pawn, and knight f4. Now that's a huge square here for the knight. The knight on e4 is hanging, so you have to take care of that. Pawn on c4 is now defended. The knight on f3 beefed up, but we're probably going to see rook d5, and these pawns are very difficult to defend. The first pawn drops, white goes rook a3 in order to defend this pawn. And we may see e4 instead. Magnus offering the exchange here, but he is confident in this resulting endgame. You win a pawn here, white knight does get to invade to e5, but I don't think that's much. Now the knight and the pawn falls, and with 4 pawns,
he resigns.
Mamedov sees no options there. 5-1 to Carlsen.
5-1, a big score. Magnus just 1.5 points away from getting through to the semifinals already. He will also, after this, he will get a 1.5 hour break, seeing as The semi-finals will only start at 7:30 Central European time. Okay, so what do we have here?
We've got an interesting position. The king is on f1. It's a little bit unusual. But on the other hand, it's not such a big deal when you have a nice advantage in the center like Magnus does. I like Magnus's position. He's castling, as we say, by hand here. We've got the pawn on b3. A little bit weak, and black does get the a file, but white can challenge that, and he can also push the pawns, which is going to be useful for him activating this bishop. That's what we see now. The b file has opened up, and white wants to invade onto b1. Black trying to fix this bishop, which wasn't doing much, pointing against d4. White retreats, does not want to accept this bishop, and we might see eventually the knight coming to b4. c5 as the pawn was under fire, and I really like white's position. You don't want to play d5, but big tactic miss there by Magnus. The pawn on e3, he goes knight e2, offering this exchange. You can take two minor pieces, but in the end, king f1 is going to give you, or king f3 is going to give you some problems. However, Mamedov saw further. He saw that he could use this this square, but d7 is going to cost him a piece. So the question is, who saw further after all? Here we see that pawn promoting, and that's a piece, and we see an exchange. So I really think that short of a serious mistake here, king takes f4, not possible, by the way. 96 check, nice little trick from the very tricky Mamedov, but he's got 8 seconds against Carlsen 16, and a lovely trick. The point is, no matter which way you took, you're able to win something. It's a clean exchange now, and I think that Magnus, if he doesn't win on position, he's just going to convert on time. Will he risk taking here? He goes for the more practical approach. He's threatening this pawn, nothing wrong with taking it, and now you could even capture here. That's what Magnus does. He knows that this king and pawn
very practical decision.
Incredible play.
And Magnus now with the black pieces up 6-1, a very impressive display. He needs only a draw to advance. It's not been, I think it's been tough. It's so hard to say, that Rauf hasn't had a good day, because Magnus, when he turns on the turbo, he's just so incredible. I guess he is the favorite in this tournament, but he will be very eager to get revenge. There was the titled arena in bullet format on Lichess on Saturday, where Alireza crushed the field and Magnus only finished, I believe, in 6th place or something like this.
Yeah, and in terms of this game, by the way, in my opinion, short of a miracle, this is going to be the final game, because Magnus has moves back Mamedov where he wants him. He's got the bishop pair, he's got a very healthy pawn structure, the queens are off the board, so there aren't many attacking options. So overall, I think black's position is just great. At some point, maybe bishop d2, you have to watch out for. Be careful, don't exchange the rooks and take this pawn though, because rook d8 will be checkmate, so that's why bishop g6 creating a square. But the bishop pair is very strong. On the other hand, white at least has this a pawn. I believe that it can be controlled, but in bullet, you never know. Some knight b6 ideas in the future. You didn't want to do that earlier because of bishop e3. Rook d7 is very strong, and actually, I think I'm going to have to eat my words, exactly, because here the position is looking very, very nice for Mamedov, who turns the screws there, and just an excellent victory from a position that didn't look to promise so much.
Absolutely. So we saw some frustration there from Carlsen, but he still has four match points, shall we say. He just needs a draw, needs 6-2.
Yeah, and in this, I mean, yeah, I don't think he's too stressed in this situation. But still, very nice fighting spirit from Rauf. It would be very tempting to sort of give up, throw in the towel there. We're seeing rook c1 here. Once again, Magnus seems to have gotten a very comfortable position. He's got a bit of a center here. Black's main hope is probably associated with pressing this center, as well as the base of the pawns here.
But now he
doesn't have this option because of rook c2.
So he forces the queen exchange.
Well, queen d5 allows to stay in, but it comes at a very heavy price. This pawn on e7, and we might see. Magnus is he means business. He just grabs another pawn. Now queen e2 defending that base of the pawns. Black trying to go for some play, but a3 shutting that down.
Very solid play for Magnus.
Yeah, rook c3, a really nice move, defending the base of the pawns. That's very typical. Queen c2, attacking more pawns, and I wouldn't be surprised if he just grabs it. That is what he does, and he goes back offering a queen exchange. That's declined, and now he starts to press with the pawns. I think we really are going to see this as the final game, but bishop takes e3 missed. King f1 and queen b1 check. there are some fighting chances here all of a sudden for the very, very tricky. But this rook has dropped, and that is that.
King is gonna run.
Yeah, unless you can skewer the queen in some way. For example, even king c4, there was a rook block. Now you're up a rook, and the king is gonna hide. I wouldn't be surprised by resignation.
And
that's what
we see a resignation here. Magnus is through 7-2. We see Rauf is not happy. I think Rauf is an excellent bullet player, of course, but against Magnus it is tough. Magnus put on the squeeze, the turbo, and we're gonna turn the player cameras off. Okay, we will take one quick breather now. The next quarterfinal will be Penguin, Andrew Tang. So I'm sure people are looking forward to seeing Andrew in action, and he will be taking on Alexei Sarana from Russia, aka maybe next time, which will be a huge match. Let me see when that will start. Just get confirmation if they will start sooner or if they are going to wait 17 minutes. I'll wait for confirmation, and we'll take a very, very quick breather to gather our spirits. But what a start we've been off to, Alex.
Yeah, it's been, so far it's been, well, I won't say a masterclass from Magnus. He has shown, I mean, his opponents are incredibly strong, and he's shown that there have been some
and you can see the players on the camera. I think I have Penguin's TV open, so wait, cut out Mr. Penguin first. Apologies about this. We are trying to
One of the issues is that some of the players we might commentate, so some of them are turning the camera on and off.
Yeah,
I conflict, and not just the players. In terms of, it's maybe the instruction is the webcam should not be turned off. They may think that it's a case of not leaving the room.
I think there's only 2 players left in the Zoom call. Let's cut them out now, and then as soon as we are ready, we'll get on the way. I think they are on underway. So let's very quickly do this. Once again, apologies about the size of Andrew's head. Alex, I'll let you talk us through the game.
So this is their first game. You can see their lifetime score at the bottom of the board is actually 4-3 in favor of Sarana. So I think, having seen that, I take back my predictions. It's clear that these two are evenly matched. Over 7 games, it's hard to judge, but this match really could go either way. Both players with a very, very similar rating around the 2,900 mark. Having said that, Penguin has been as high as something like 3,200 on Lead Chess. I don't know the exact rating. Having said that, speed is Penguin's friend, as arguably the fastest player in the world on the mouse. So his rating, his skill is especially pronounced in the Hyper Bullet 30 seconds aside, or even in Ultra Bullet, where he really is the best in the world at those formats. Here we can see Sarana can certainly compete. Now there is some trickery here. You can take this piece, black is up a piece, but in the end the knight on e4 has dropped, so white recovers that piece. On the other hand, Penguin should be happy with the position. He's hanging on to the b6 pawn, and we see a nice move from Sarana. Rook d1, the knight on f6 was being hit. Now h3, knight e5, we see bishop d5 supporting the structure. Knight takes e4, giving up a pawn, but controlling f7. I like what Penguin has been doing. Rook f8, fortifying that weak f7 pawn, moving the knight away from the attack of the queen and the rook. And we see Sarana, Penguin actually offers this pawn on a6. A little bit of an unusual decision, but it seems to have paid off. He's now up a pawn, he's got the knight on d4, and he's the one pressing. On the other hand, look at Sarana's speed. This is Penguin. He is the fastest in the world, arguably. However, Penguin's speed at the late stages of the game are incredible, and we're seeing here that speed, but he's got a huge gap to bridge, and Sarana incredibly fast as well. He's down to 1.9 seconds. Penguin is streaming as well, so this may be working against him. He's bridged the gap. He's bridged a huge amount of the gap, but will he bridge enough? Sarana picks up the pawn. Penguin needs to go for the flag, and Penguin goes for the flag, gets the flag, and makes the draw. That is what makes Penguin, like one of the many things that makes Penguin so lethal in the bullet format.
To be fair, we see Andrew on camera. He is streaming, but he's not commentating.
If you were to commentate, it would be simply say,
a bit too much.
Even too much, even for the legendary Penguin, who is known by all bullet aficionados in the world. Queen a5 here we're seeing. So that was a close shave for Penguin, but he's done that before, and I wouldn't be surprised if he does this again. We see a big attack from Penguin in this position. This pawn has somehow arrived on g7. He's got very nice pieces. They're developed. He has a little bit of a weak pawn, but he doesn't care. He might shift that bishop to d3. He's attacking the pawn on h7. Black has to take that pawn on g7 to create some problems, and Black is going ahead and trying to complete his development. We might see an exchange of bishops instead. Black choosing to fortify his king's position here. Bishop f4, activating the bishop. Black still has the question of how to complete the development. Intermezzo exchange on e4 because there were some tactical opportunities. h3 preventing any attack, and white is very, very solid, but black has staved off the danger. We've got equal time. Rook b5, rook g4, nice sequence. Maybe we're going to see c4. Rook d5 was necessary to protect the queen. We see the queen getting back into safety, centralizing here. And the question is, what is the plan from white? We might see, huge move, queen h7, and that is it. That's going to decide it. Crushing move. I don't see a way to defend here. Queen g6 is going to be checkmate. Really nice tactics from Penguin.
Very nice game. Very, very nice game by Penguin indeed, and he takes a 1.5 lead. Remember, for the quarterfinals, the rules remain the same. It is first to 6.5, and what a game by Penguin.
Yeah, I mean, it looked like he was going to go 1-0 down, and now he's 1.5. I mean, this is Penguin. So advantage Penguin. We're going to see what happens in this third game. A really important game because Sarana has the white pieces, and for example, were Penguin to win here and take a 2-game lead with the white pieces in the next one, it's going to be very, very difficult.
Yeah, it's a quite a short match, best of 12, so it's very important in the beginning. If you can get momentum, if you can win, 2 or 3 games in a row, it makes a huge, huge difference.
Yeah, and here I really like Penguin's position overall. Serrana's position is also quite good with his pieces, but we see knight takes g3 with tactical shots, and so far Penguin is the one scoring these shots. Knight c6, a counter blow. The point is, if you had taken there, that bishop on e3 was hanging, but this is not a good outcome. Look at all the pawns, they are dropping. Black's king is safer than white's because of the crippled pawn structure. We see queen e5 centralizing. That knight on g3 is very, very annoying. We might see at some point this knight coming in. h5 is a useful move. h4, now the knight here is very, very stable. We might potentially see an improvement of the king is what we're looking at. And queen c3 striking at this rook, also keeping an eye on this knight, keeping an eye on this pawn. The pawn on e3 falls. 92, end of the game. 92, end of the game. Serrana will resign.
He does resign. 2.5 lead for Penguin.
Huge. Keep in mind, by the way, Penguin crushed it in the first round.
Yeah.
6.5 to a half.
Incredible. Also, let's remind everyone, if Penguin wins this match, he has a big opponent awaiting him in the semi-finals. He will square it off against world champion Magnus Carlsen if he makes it past Alexei Serrana.
Two old rivals at this point. As mentioned, they've played hundreds of times on League Chess and in Bullet, and we're going to see them battle once again if things stay this way. So far, Penguin controlled position here. Black doesn't have too much reason to complain. He's got a nice center, but white's pieces are quite well placed. Bishop on a6 for the time being, putting a bit of pressure here, but you never really want to take as black, because then you would leave yourself with these both of these pawns isolated. Black is making headway in the center here, but we might see bishop f5. We might also see knight c5. Certainly the bishop pair here is not a big deal. e4 instead chosen, which provokes black into making a decision here. Bishop b5 from black, inviting white to take to correct the pawn structure. Penguin's not going to accommodate that, so he shifts his pieces around. He might be looking for knight d3. That's what he's doing here. Rook d2, trying to gang up on the d file. And we really see, in my opinion, Penguin is taking control of this position. Black has to watch out for some tactical blows at the right moment. For now, this rook is defended, but these x-rays are very, very dangerous. a4, forcing black's hand. We see now black is forced to stay with this bad pawn structure. The bishop on d6 is undefended, and it's being eyed up. We might see a shifting of the knight to c4. That's what we see. Penguin improving his pieces. Rook d3 staying solid. The pawn on f2, though, you have to be a little bit careful about it. Was there an opportunity to take? No, there wasn't. The queen was protecting it. See, the bishop on d4 is a well-placed piece. White is dancing around that. That's the heart of the heart of the structure. Let's say the base of the structure for white. So white is positioning his pieces very, very well. Something has happened here on f7. I don't even know what happened. Something came off the board.
The clock, Alex. Both of them under 10 seconds.
Oh,
I would prefer the knight. Knights are so tricky.
Yes, and we're seeing some pressure here.
Trying.
Queen b7 ideas are in the air. First he takes this pawn goes off. The king is way weaker. That's what's going to mark the difference. But look at the clock situation. The clock situation, he's going to get flagged again.
Penguin's too fast.
Yeah, and the problem was there, Penguin's king was safe, so you cannot check. And black kept getting checked, and that burns your clock time.
Incredible.
So the Penguin's bullet experience really showing, and his speed.
Yeah.
I mean, I've actually personally played Penguin probably about a couple of hundred times, so I know the torture. I've experienced the anguish. Yeah, you need an absolutely massive time advantage in order to have a chance against Penguin. Yeah. And Serrana, I think, has gone in with that strategy. He's gone in with the strategy. Let's play fast, and he's getting there, but not quite enough. Also, a3, by the way, dangerous move in the air. Very
interesting to see Penguin in between games. He was playing Ultra Bullet against Alireza, so both of them warming up. You could discuss the benefits, pros and cons of this strategy, but seems to be working so far.
Yeah. I mean, Penguin has shown incredible performance so far. He's lost 0 games in his match 1 and match 2.
Yeah.
So far we're what is it, like 11 games in, something like this, and he hasn't lost a single one. And this is Bullet, where it's so easy to blunder.
Yeah, I think Andrew is absolutely. We shouldn't write this match off just yet. By the way, it is 3.5, but in Bullet, as we said, anything can happen at any moment. You have a run, you get some momentum. But if we were to see Penguin versus Magnus, I think Penguin is one of the players who can, pose some real questions to Magnus. Yeah, but. Back to the game.
Will we see some sacrifices here? You cannot take the bishop because of this, and I think Penguin is calculating that. He doesn't like it. He ends up a little bit awkward here. Queen g4, killing this x-ray, and queen f5. and queen back to g4. Penguin offering a draw. Serrana, he needs to put pressure, so he keeps the game alive. We're seeing another scramble, and then once again Serrana is the one with the time lead. Can Penguin make up the time lead here? We're seeing that speed from Penguin is going to come. The checks are very, very dangerous for Serrana, and look, 2 seconds against 0.5. Can Serrana, if Serrana gets flagged here, this is going to spell disaster for him and for his chances in the match. He needs to make it, and he does make it. He does make it. That was
and
huge.
we see the smile from Serrana. I think it's the first emotion we have seen from the player. It was so incredibly important for Alexei Serrana to win this game, to get into the match. That is Penguin's first defeat, and so important also for him to come back into the match. And we now have a match on our hands. Alexei Serrana trails by 2 points.
Yeah, but it's a bad start for this game here, a very important game. And look at those white pieces, they're all super active. You've got those dark squares where you're getting crushed. Knight here, bishop on e7, already the loss of material. White can collect this rook, but he's in no rush. Black cannot step out of the squares. Maybe we'll see now the capture. And the knights get off the board. White has an extra exchange, and the problem for black is not just the exchange, but how do you complete your development here? Black is playing b6, but there is no real threat, because if you take here, the rook hangs in the end. And the problem is if you go b5, the knight still hangs. The knight is lost, and we might see a resignation. We've got 13 seconds. Serrana, you can see he is not happy, because just after striking, he needed to build that momentum, and Penguin comes back and does this.
By the way, I see a question in the chat. What is the score in the match? If you guys are new to using lead chess, so this is the all-time score that you see under the boards, all-time score between the players, and this is the score for the current session. So in our case, this is the score in the match. So 4.5, 1.5 to Penguin.
Really, really convincing, and the two players, by the way, seem to be happy with this variation. We've seen it already. I think this is the third time that we see it in the match, and Serrana, he is putting his eggs in this particular basket, playing against this pawn structure. It's known as an isolated queen's pawn, but Penguin seems to be happy. He's a very tactical player, and he's happy to get the opportunity to have pieces in a really good squares here. So very, very complex game, and we need to see some results here for Serrana. Penguin going into the tank. Maybe he's even looking at some tactical blows at the... Wait a second, that pawn on f2, the queen hangs, knight d3, all sorts of queen d4, all sorts of madness. I don't know, I have no idea what is actually going on here. I suspect most people don't either, but the players might.
Serrana is going into the tank. This is a big problem. If he doesn't find anything this time situation, we see him getting quite frustrated on the clock. They go down this line, but he has invested a lot of time.
He's invested a huge amount of time. He needs... Knight g4 now is crushing, because if you go king h1, rook takes h2 is mate. There was nothing to do. And so Penguin outfoxing Serrana, that is the class of Penguin.
Penguin 1 win away from qualifying to the semi-finals, where none other than Magnus Carlsen awaits.
It's incredible. When you play against Penguin, the problem is you need to win in position, which is almost impossible, and on time, which is actually impossible. So this is your problem, right? You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. And we're seeing that a player of the caliber of Serrana, let's remind ourselves, this is a 2,650 rated player from Russia. He's quite young, I believe 22 years old, or maybe, no, 20 years old, I believe. And we see Penguin once again is simply in command here. I think Penguin might finish it here. We see a huge center. Serrana is trying to chip away at that, but b3, and you're too slow. You know, even if you manage to achieve all of this, this center is keeping the pieces out of play. We've also got a huge control of the dark squares. We see another pawn, so now we're seeing a lot of pawns here connected. That could decide it in a middle game, that could decide it in an end game. We also see this very powerful bishop that can crush the dark squares. So black is basically in desperate trouble here, and I think maybe the only reason he's really continuing is because if he doesn't save anything from this game, it's over.
Yeah, I think also
maybe a chance. Oh no, sorry, the pawn. Yeah.
In Bullet, unless the situation is completely is that?
I think that's going to be it, because now it's pinned and we might see rook a1. We see a more practical choice, taking this pawn. We're seeing rook g4 check, and that's checkmate on the next move. Penguin with a devastating victory.
What an impressive showing from Andrew Tang.
To be honest with you, I had said initially that Penguin, before I saw on it.
I think Alireza is a big favorite. So what? And we are back. Technical issues are still getting in the way, but we'll try and get the player cameras fixed as we go along. For now, Alex, over to you for the games while I try and get the cameras fixed.
Yeah, so this first game we see Oberweisen, by the way, with the white pieces. He's a very, very aggressive player. Alireza, also a very aggressive player, and we're seeing a sort of a Sicilian pawn structure here. The black king is on e8, Alireza's king, but he shouldn't be too worried about that because there aren't too many lines of attack for now. So.
Okay, so we have Alireza.
Yeah, sorry by the way, if I stop commentary, it's because at that moment in time the board freezes on our end, so apologies, but it should be fixed very, very soon. In this position, I like Alireza's position. He goes for a very bold sacrifice, however, of an exchange. He was feeling the pressure on queen b5 check. I'm not so sure that I like the position any longer. On the other hand, the rook on f1 finds it very, very difficult to enter. The f file is simply unavailable. And black actually, well, at the moment he's got only one pawn for the exchange, but that pawn is in the center. His king is in good shape. I think overall it's probably something very close to equal, but the question is, how will the time scramble evolve? For now, we're seeing a really big time edge here, 16 seconds against 11, but Alireza, incredibly fast player, and we see a draw. That's a little bit, I mean, it was objectively a draw, but it's interesting. Oberweisen does not try to flag with the time advantage. Makes you wonder, will Alireza, if he has a time advantage, be a little bit more merciless attempting to flag those situations? So in this game here, again, the action extremely fast. Bishop to a8 in order to protect the b pawn. Both sides lifting their h pawn in order to create some lift for the king. Long term, improving their position. It's a pretty slow game. It's a structure that is known like as a hedgehog here, and black is breaking on d5. That's usually what you want as black because you liberate your pieces. On the other hand, white's position is perfectly safe. Bishop d6 trying to put pressure, or bishop d4 trying to put pressure there. The white pieces are very central. Oberweisen's position is solid. White is going all in potentially here, shifting the rook to g4. That's going to be vulnerable. Knight e5, the exchange of that dark square bishop means that there's no longer pressure, and the question is, how can white bring that piece back into the game? We see rook check and queen e1. We see black is trying to use his initiative. I really like black's position. Alireza is going to have to trick Oberweisen. He goes rook here, offering this endgame, but you see it is a little bit better for black. Bishop takes b5.
Bishop b5 is in the air.
Is in the air. Here, king g1, rook a4. Now no more bishop takes b5, and king g7 in order to allow bishop takes b4. And we see this position. Oberweisen is simply outplaying Alireza Firouzja in this position. He transfers the rook over. He wants to make the most of these pawns. How will he do it? Maybe bishop c3, b4. One of the things that you have to be careful about. Oh, nice trick. Really, really nice trick from Alireza. He grabs this pawn on f7. Rook f2, however, will recover the pawn on f3, rendering material equal on the king side once again. But again, these pawns are problematic for white. White is going after them though. He grabs one of them, but the b pawn is rolling. He grabs another pawn on h6. I think Alireza is outplaying
7 seconds each.
Time is going to be the decision, and here Alireza does have the time edge. He drops his piece. Oberweisen is collapsing towards the end. Alireza has the time as well. I think we're going to see an Alireza victory from the jaws of defeat. So wow, incredible resilience from Alireza, and he takes the lead in the match.
What a game.
It looked at some point like, you know, it would be 1.5 at least to Oberweisen, but we see Alireza showing one of the things, his grittiness, one of the many incredible traits of his play style.
Absolutely. What a game.
We're seeing yet another Sicilian, but something really interesting has happened here. e5, the knight had nowhere to go. Black's king is in a lot of trouble, but on the other hand, we see that he is up a piece. Queen b5, he's inviting a queen exchange. We're probably not going to see that because you want to keep the attack going. Queen e3, the knight on f6, defending the pawn on h7, which is being eyed up, the knight being eyed up. So we're definitely seeing a lot of vulnerability in the position. One saving grace for white is this knight on a2. Will white take time to reroute it? Well, the bishop took, no longer guarding the b pawn, and the opportunistic Oberweisen gets in there. King g8 trying to bring the king to safety. Rook goes back to h5. Queen c6 creating threats against c2. Queen goes back to d6, coordinating. We see a lot of pawns, 4 pawns for the piece for white. So I think objectively speaking, white is at least equal and has the somewhat easier play. But look at Alireza. He's swapping towards the endgame. Knight b4, however, fork, creating problems, grabbing another pawn, rook check. Doesn't seem to do much. Bishop d7, I'm not quite sure that I understand the benefits of that move. Going after the b pawn, you can give a check. Alireza suggests that he actually wants more. He wants to press this position. He does have a couple of seconds on the clock, but will that be enough? The pawn on f3 hangs, however, and now the pawn on g4 also hangs. This position is still perfectly okay for white, for Oberwesen with the 3 pawns. I think objectively it should be around equal, but but the question is, there we go, bishop takes b2 will equalize. The pawn on b4 falls in the end. Again, incredible play from Alireza to hold that very tricky position.
Those games are crazy, Alex. I'm struggling to.
Oh no! I thought that the queen was hanging for a second, but it was just the slight lag of this screen, or maybe the lag of my own eyes. Frankly, maybe the screen was fine. So yeah, incredible level so far. These two players, we're seeing very a lot of aggression, but so far on the board, Oberwesen has really shown that he can compete.
So Alireza up 2-1 in a close match. So far, this one, Oper's got a huge time advantage out of the opening.
Yeah, Oberwesen, I mean, he is one of the fastest players on the side as well, and we see, I think, a little opportunity there to win a piece, but it all happened so fast. They're actually heading towards an endgame where, once again, Oberwesen has a very smooth position. White has an extra pawn on the queen side, but on the other hand, black has the pawn on the king side. What would I prefer personally? I would slightly prefer to be the side with the pawn on the queen side, because sometimes that pawn can really annoy the opponent. But big question.
Bishop has been trapped, so that bishop's not going to come back into the game anytime soon. But can black take advantage of it?
Well, the bishop can get now even to f8. I'm a little bit surprised, I have to say, that this was allowed.
I think it was missed, probably.
Yeah, perhaps that's the case. And now Oberwesen is in serious trouble. We see that queenside pawn that we were talking about being a problem. b7 and bishop d6 is a huge crushing threat.
This was a big miss. It felt like Oberwesen was in control, but Alireza incredibly resourceful, and he takes a 3-1 lead. So let's see what's going on here.
Well, it seems like it was a very fast opening variation, which gives black 3 minor pieces. I think they're both in theory. We're just going to both sit here and pretend that we know what's going on, that we know the theory. I guess that both players have played this variation before, but it has to be said, I don't like it for white. This is a lot of pieces, and another exchange fell, and that means that black now has a big material advantage. Cutting up the pawn structure, cutting up the king, rook f2, and we see, actually, to be honest, I would not be surprised with a quick resignation here from Oberwesen. Alireza is really starting to crank up the heat. We're seeing bishop d5, bishop on g2, rook on c6, everything is dropping, it's a collapse, and there comes the resignation. 4-1-2, Alireza.
It goes so quickly. Once they crank up the heat.
Yeah.
When Alireza, when he gets in the swing of things, he's such an incredible beast.
I really believe that Alireza over the coming 5, 6, 10 years is going to be the dominant force, at least in bullet, and I would also say in blitz. He's already been able to beat Magnus on high tournament events, in blitz and in bullet. And the scary thing is he's 17 years old, so still a lot of room for improvement. And if his reflexes and his tactical vision, if those things continue to get better, along with better understanding, then, if I'm scared now, I don't know. I mean, it's incredible. It's simply incredible.
And by the way, so Alireza currently in a good position to qualify here. There is one last quarterfinal that will be Naroditsky versus Tang, but I think we are potentially headed. Potentially, we could see what I think many would hail as the dream semi-final. I should focus on this game, but Magnus Carlsen, Penguin, Alireza, and Naroditsky, who are 4 of, I think, the absolutely best bullet players in the world.
Yeah, and this position, Oberwesen was, I think, in a lot of trouble, but he's mixed it up a lot here. King d2 to try and attack that pawn is not so easy to do. 94, he does go for this, but d2 is already a threat of mate, so he'd seen that check and being able to sort of drive that rook here. But as the sequence leads to black actually being up in exchange, and now I think he can exchange and go into a winning pawn endgame. The question is, can black can white somehow force this pawn off the board or create some kind of fortress here? And that's what we're seeing Operwezen trying to break. But look at Firouzja, he just doesn't allow it. There we go, b6. And the problem is now you can take the pawn, you can take on c6. The question is, can Alireza hold on enough to flag his opponent? Alireza, one of the fastest players on the planet. 1 second, under 1 second, it's 0.1 seconds. Operwezen does not get there with the timeout. Huge game.
And one or two moves to game, but we see the speed, simply astonishing speed from Alireza. So 4.5, 1.5 now to Alireza, who's 2 points away from qualifying to the semis.
You have to feel for
Heartbreak for Hopper, yeah.
He's been so close on all these occasions. He's a fan favorite amongst the Lee chess crowd that has seen him play for many, many years, although perhaps many will not have actually seen him before. So that's something I think that you know, it's nice for the curiosity of those who are Lee chess regulars. So it's nice to put a face to a name. And but Alireza so far just proving a little too strong. And in this game here, we see that Alireza's position is commanding. We see an exchange sacrifice, but these pawns are worth it. White tries to activate the knight, going via c5. That's a nice move actually, because you have to be careful. For example, if you did this, because of the x-ray, you're in trouble. And we see now Alireza trying to figure that out. f3, very nice as well, breaking down this structure. And this is suddenly some kind of a chance, but nice tricks from Alireza. And we don't see an exchange. Maybe we'll see it now. No exchange, knight d4 not possible because the bishop takes d4. I'm surprised by this move because once the opposite color bishops come onto the board, I think that's a very, very difficult position to win. The only question is, does Operwezen want to try and press him on the clock? He does have a little bit of a time lead, but I think it's going to be...
he has to try at least.
He certainly has to try, but he doesn't do so. One of the things about Operwezen, he's a very fair player. Maybe too fair in this particular instance. But on the other hand, can you really flag an opponent with like 16 seconds left?
I mean, especially when we've seen his speed, probably I think Alireza would hold. Yeah, it was a repetition. I don't know if he could have tried to avoid it, is what we are saying. But anyway, a fair result based on the game. But yeah, we are saying he did not try, I think, is what we're saying.
Yeah, I think his best chance was before he went into that opposite color bishop endgame.
The knight.
But, you know.
5-2 to Alireza. He's 1.5 game away, 1.5 point away. And his position, the black position looks very dangerous.
Yeah, we're seeing actually Alireza picking up a pawn. He's got this very strong bishop against this dark squared king. That's a more effective piece than the counterpart, the light squared bishop. Knight is on e4. Great square. This pawn is going to be long term a problem. Bishop is planning to reroute to b2. Knight d6 and probably going to shift to c4. That's a great square for the knight. The bishop is now in a wonderful square. Mate is being threatened. This rook is in trouble. Knight g6 ideas are in the air. Knight f4 creating problems against all of the pieces. Black is just reacting. Knight f6 and knight takes g7. Both are threats because of the x-ray. Knight f6 missed by both players. I'm a little bit surprised. Knight f6 still possible. You would claim an exchange, and that's what Alireza does. He wins an exchange. He's totally in control here of this position. He's got all of the better pieces, more material, better pawn structure, all of the advantages that you're looking for. He's got them. So I think, and on top of that, he's got the clock time, 5 seconds. He's shown that in the final hurdle on the clock, he's a little bit faster, and I think he's going to convert. But we'll see what Operwezen can do here. Yeah, the problem is Operwezen cannot actually create attacking chances against a very, very safe white king. And in the meantime, white is going to have checks. You see still moves that are trying to be defensive and massive exchange under 1 second. And we do
Alireza 6-2. He's now just one draw away from making it to the semifinals.
Yeah, I mean, what can be said? Alireza is just a monster. It's hard for people who are not familiar with Operwezen. It's hard to actually get across just how strong this guy is for somebody to win 6-2 against him. But wait a second, huge position here because we do see white making some headway here. We've got one extra pawn for Operwezen and he is in command here so far. He's putting pressure against e6. Alireza needs to make sure to avoid a loss here in order to go through.
Absolutely. Just one more thing you were saying, you know, people might not realize we didn't actually talk about this, but Operwezen in the round of the last 16 beat Boris Grachev, I believe 6.5, 1.5 or something, an insane score against a grandmaster the caliber.
Oh, very, very nasty trick there by Alireza. Knight f3, pretending to drop this bishop on d7, seeing more than Opervezin, the check here, the intermezzo. There's no good way to block with the queen. Oper blocked with the rook. But once the queen dropped, he resigned. The point was you could not even take here. Rook takes. You cannot win that back. So it's not, I mean, you're losing pretty much a full queen here. And that is the end. Opervezin, well, amazing tournament.
I think people, I mean, all these players, the problem is the score is 7-2, which seems like a severe score, but I think it just shows you, because the people who are regularly on Lead Chess, they know, Opervezin is such an incredibly strong player, such a fast player, and for Alireza to beat them 7-2 is just incredible. I mean, Alireza is such a monster, and that was our third of 4.
Alireza has been described as devilishly tricky by none other than the world champion Magnus Carlsen himself. So if Magnus has so many problems, then what are us mortals going to do about it, right? And I mean, yeah, I'm just excited to see Alireza. Heartbreak for Opervezin, but as a viewer, I think excited to see Alireza go further in this competition.
Absolutely. Let's remind everyone, Alireza and Magnus are not in the same bracket, which means we could see an Alireza against Magnus final. But before he gets there, he's gonna have a tough task on his hand. Let me update the bracket. Thank you very much again to The Truth and to all my mods here in the channel. Thank you also to all you incredible viewers who are so active in the chat. Very much appreciated. I will update the bracket, and then we will talk about our last quarterfinal. Alex, we will see Daniel Naroditsky take on Joseph Taher from Indonesia.
Well, we have to say, Naroditsky.
Taher from Indonesia beat Shan Sargsyan 7-5 to make it to the quarterfinals. Naroditsky, meanwhile, beat Raunak Sadvani 7-3.
Yeah, and by the way, that is an incredible result.
And we are back literally just in time. If you leave it 1 second with the... I just cut the cameras, but they are off the last of the quarterfinals. Daniel Naroditsky against Joseph Taher from Indonesia. Let's just leave it like this. After this game, I might see if I can refigure it out. But Rebecca Harris, huge favorite here, Daniel Naroditsky.
Yeah, he's sporting a 3,000 plus rating. That's very few people on the planet can say this. Joseph, for his part, an absolute bullet monster. The last of the international masters left in this sea of sharks, of grandmasters. So we're going to see, is he able to fight off Rebecca Harris? But look at that dominant lifetime score. It's 7-1 in Daniel Naroditsky's favor, and he's picked up this pawn. Little lapse in focus. Was it? Well, no, it's 6 pawns each, and the position is actually quite good for Joseph. It's a strong start. Bishop takes d5, not the kind of scary move, and white offers a draw, recognizing it's a very equal position. To the match. Yeah, so Daniel Naroditsky, aka Danya, he is seems to be happy enough to take it to game 2, where he does have that slight disadvantage with the black pieces. The pawn on d5 is dropping here, and I don't think you can afford to go for these checks because there were problems on f7. So black actually is in a little bit of trouble here. He's down a pawn. And he also has a worse pawn structure. A slight saving grace is the bishop pair, and there's a lot of pieces aiming towards the queen side. Maybe it was a bit too risky what white did here. He's probably going to have to make a concession, something like b3 here, and allow Daniel to take here and maybe step in with the bishop for a check, king e2, maybe another check here on d8. Daniel is so strong. Another option, by the way. Oh, huge move. Knight c3, bishop a3 was the threat. What was
checkmate threat?
No, actually, my apologies. There was the square at d2. He's giving up this piece, but the idea is that he will castle. And the problem is the rook from f8 will swing over to d8, creating problems. And this rook on b1 is so powerful because it's paralyzing the position. Daniel is so tricky, and I think he might do it. White says, please figure out what you're going to do. I don't want to be in this constant threat. And so he's shutting things down, but I think Naroditsky here is in control. The threat is knight takes e6 because you cannot take back, so white steps king c2. Black will definitely stay here, paralyzing these kingside pieces as mentioned. White grabs the pawn, but that's a very risky pawn to grab because how is your bishop going to step out? And look at the wonderful job this knight is doing. White resigns. Incredible play from the opening. Naroditsky with the black pieces got himself into a bit of trouble, and then he tricked his way out faster than we could than we could register in.
Absolutely. And so he takes the lead, 1.5, 5 wins to go, still a long way. But I think all in all, Josef has been holding his own. And also, once again, let's remind everyone, he eliminated Can Sargsyan in the first round today, the round of the last 16, which I guess to me was, together with Opper beating Boris Grachev, you know, the two upsets of this event, of this knockout stage.
Yeah, but now he's really up against it, and in this particular game I once again like Naroditsky's position. Knight f4 will attack the queen and create this threat. Same effect with knight d4, bishop c8, the only way you prevent both threats. Knight e6 anyway though, and after bishop takes knight, which is forced, white will be able to play at some point bishop to d5. Maybe we'll even see it on the next move. Instead he chooses to pin here. Black might go c6 and d5, trying to shut down the effect. He goes for something similar with this move. However, the difference is this does allow bishop d5. There's a little bit of pressure here against the pawn, so c5 play, queen b2, maintaining the pin, breaking the pin, threatening to capture the bishop. Now, black fights to distract this bishop so he could capture the pawn on e6, but he drops the c5 pawn in the process. And once again, Naroditsky in control here. Excellent pieces. The queen a7 check decides the game on the spot. The sharpness, his tactical acuity is through the roof for Naroditsky, and that's a 2.5 half lead. And we can see why he was so relaxed about offering that drawing game one. You know, it's like.
Well, I mean, even let's remind everyone that on Monday the 3 qualifying arenas, there were 3 of them, but Dania only showed up for the last one. But he just absolutely crushed it, and he actually scored the highest score out of anyone in the 3 qualifying arenas, hence why his seeding number for this knockout bracket was number 2. So Magnus was seeded 1, but then Dania next.
Yeah, simply incredible. I mean, these top guys, they only had to play 1 tournament. Other poor unfortunate souls had to grind it out for 3 tournaments, maybe scrape in. But people like Firouzja and Naroditsky, they just show up once and they get the job done. That's really the level of class of these players. The knight is going to have to move to e5 here, and that's a beautiful knight. However, Josef
I'm a bit worried about the black king.
Yeah, Josef is under severe attack here. Or sorry, Naroditsky is under severe attack. He goes queen e8, fighting against this knight. And the problem is, this is one of those situations that can shift very, very quickly. You see knight takes f6, you can take here because the queen would have been attacked, but we can see a little bit of a shift. Knight takes f6, really nice move, by the way, from Josef. He needed that move. Now the point is, rook takes, he can collect 2 pieces, but he doesn't go for that. Maybe he saw something that he did not like in that position. Goes instead for queen d4, he eliminates this pawn. That's a useful pawn to grab, but you have to say that the worst seems to be over for black, who drives this rook to f8. And maybe we will see gradual improvement of the black pieces and an eventual counterattack. The pawn on a3 is very annoying as it creates some back rank checkmate threats. For the time being, queen h7 has to control this h5 square, otherwise the sort of ladder mate or the like this, and we might see a sacrifice because knight f3 check is an option, regaining the material, and this pawn on e4 cannot still be captured. Whoa, huge move, queen d4, game over. Queen d4 check missed by Naroditsky. There was nothing to do.
You didn't see it, but we had a big reaction from Daniel Naroditsky, who was not happy with that loss. And Josef gets his first win. I saw there was a question in the chat, no disrespect, but how did Josef get this far? Well, he qualified. He qualified in the arena and he beat Can Sargsyan in the last 16. And here he is, taking it to Rebecca Harris. Winning his first game back there, and now he's just trailing by 1 point, 1.5, 2.5.
Yeah, we don't know too much about Josef, perhaps the player who we know the least in terms of off the board, but sometimes you never know. He is from Indonesia. It is not a country with a massive chess culture. And sometimes, you know, maybe a player has incredible talent, but, you know, values, like pursues other professions besides chess. I suspect he may not be a professional, but perhaps somebody can shed some light. He's certainly is able to hold his own against these grandmasters.
As for the question, what time is it in Indonesia? It's fine now because he actually qualified from the last arena, which was played, which only started 2 hours from now. So I think he should be. It's like midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. It's late, but could be worse. Could be worse. So let's see what is going on here. Opposite colored bishops, but black is up a pawn.
Yeah, so Josef is very much in control here. I think it's a very hard position to make something of because you want to use that extra pawn on the queen side, but it's very difficult to advance them because white has such a dominant grip on the dark squares. Very typical situation when you've got opposite colored bishops that tend to lead to a lot of draws. On the other hand, he's maintaining the pace. He has finally crashed through and he's got this pawn. On the other hand, it did cost him the pawn on h4, so we've now got level material. He can't really take this pawn on g2 with the bishop because there were checks. He manages to take it with the rook. He's up a pawn. Importantly, he's holding his own on the clock. Plays rook h2. Probably he doesn't want...
Stepping out of rook g8.
Yeah, he doesn't want the rooks to come off. That would be very, very difficult for his winning chances. He might give a check and start pushing this pawn. And I like what he's doing. Probably bishop e4. You cannot take this pawn because of bishop f5. Danya spotting this bishop f5, consolidating the position. The bishop under fire. Rook d1. Black really wants to do this. White is going to stop it. 5 seconds each. This is the final hurdle. It's really who will be able to compete better in this
game. He blundered his rook. We didn't even see. And what is this? 2 seconds each.
Both sides blundered the rook. Rebecca Harris, though, in control with over 2 seconds. Both players incredibly fast. He's just playing like this. Rebecca is playing for the win, and he's just playing like this. He pushes the pawn. And Rebecca, what? Oh!
Daniel looks so...
Oh! Did you see the reaction from Naroditsky?
He did with a fist
He did like a double fist pump the second we saw. He really... That was a huge game.
I couldn't keep... I was trying to keep one eye on the board and one eye on Daniel. Because like at first I thought it was a reaction of anger. That was so crazy. And we see Daniel, now he looks calm and collected again, but you love to see that emotion from the players. And Daniel now takes a 3.5, 1.5 lead.
But he's not happy with this position. We saw him slightly shaking his head at one point, and that's because Josef tricked him a little bit in the opening, and Josef is up a pawn here.
Josef really has a poker face, agree with the chat.
Yeah, for sure. Josef just, completely calm and collected. Great nerves, it seems. But yeah, we'll see what happens here. Josef is putting the squeeze on in this position. He's hitting the pawn, he's hitting the bishop. He collects that bishop on c6, which was a strong piece. Now he goes bishop f3, and he's the only one here with both bishops. However, allowing this pawn to come off the board, maybe that was a little bit of a miss. Bishop takes a7 as possible. Maybe you could go rook a8, bishop b6 hitting the rook because you want to gain a tempo, but rook d2 invading on the 7th rank. This pawn is a monster. Long term, it's a monster. Rook f8.
The intention, we want to create some counterplay.
Yes, the intention is to break forward, and that's what we see right here. But both sides going after it. Knight f3 was a threat with check. That's why king takes g2 was played. Now we're going to see a rook move, but white has to be careful where exactly it goes. We see this idea. Bishop c3 connected with knight e1 check ideas. Now he sacrifices. He's going all in with this pawn, and I have to say I like the play. a7. There is nothing to be done about bishop takes c6. You see Daniel. He knows he's in trouble. He goes, oh, beautiful move from Josef. c5. I'm not interested in that bishop, even though that might be winning, because I know that pawn is worth your rook. And now we see extra piece. And we see the pawns flying up the board. I think Josef is going to convert this. He's going to exchange the bishops. He's going to move in with his king. And I think Josef's got enough time. Naroditsky does too, and he resigns. Huge game from Josef, and the first real bit of emotion there from Josef.
It wasn't so much of an emotion rather than just like refocusing. I'm a big fan. I have to say I've become a fan. I always love, like so many other people, an underdog story. I think it's so great that we have Josef here, that we have someone representing, the East Asia kind of area. And he is our last international master, and he's putting up a great fight here against Daniel Naroditsky, who still has the lead though, 3.5, 2.5.
Yeah. I mean, it's incredible. What can I say? I think it's a very, very cool story.
Yeah.
And in terms of this game here, we see that Naroditsky seems to be pressing, but Josef has his trumps, right? Josef has this pressure against c3, and bishop a4 forces the rook away, winning that pawn. So Josef has made more progress on the queen side than white, who has attacking intentions. Rook e3 allows for the exchange, But I like Josef's position. H6 shutting down that square. Some knight g5 ideas, and g5 very, very typical. Now, white is keeping an eye on this point, but he has to go passive because the pawn on e3 was falling. And Josef with a nice maneuver, collecting this bishop. Now there are no problems associated with a queen-bishop battery. And Josef's tactical vision is incredible.
I was gonna say, I mean, he's playing very fast, but he is also playing very well. I've been incredibly impressed by his play.
Here's a question. What
Time
will he do?
though, careful. 20. A draw.
Queen f1 with a draw, agreed, because queen f6 was a huge threat and he had half the time on his clock.
But it's very interesting strategy from Daniel Naroditsky, who I think is the first player we've seen all day, and even even in the qualifiers, offer draws sometimes. Like usually we don't see that so much.
That's true, actually. Yeah, that's true. And so far they've been accepted.
Yeah.
The respect being shown here. By the way, I like what Naroditsky has gotten out of the opening. This bishop on a6 is a monster, because what are you going to do about the king? You don't really want to castle queenside, because that semi-open b file could give you some problems. So we're seeing bishop c4. I wouldn't be surprised if white tries to contest this bishop. Instead he says, no, I don't care, I will castle queenside. And the question is, will black be able to punish him? We see that that's definitely the idea, but white has his own nasty intentions on the h5. Black gets there first with the first connection with the pawn, but knight g5 was creating a threat of mate in connection with the queen on c2. Now it's on to Josef, who goes king d2 and says, yeah, you're right, actually there are some problems here on the queen side. I'm going to try to flee, but it's come at a price. Knight takes b2 would allow the option to win, and not just a pawn, but an exchange. That is the option that black goes for. We might see a further invasion, maybe even queen a3. I like the position. c5
also makes sense, undermining the center.
Yes, this is very, very typical in these situations where you have the safer king, and we're seeing this. And now c6, very controlled, defending the pawn, and the rooks invade. There may not be queens, but the pawns will drop. However, this is a concern if you are Naroditsky. It's not so easy to defend this pawn, and after takes,
that c-pawn suddenly looks very dangerous.
Yeah, which is why we see king f8 trying to approach with the king in order to control this pawn. The pawn is within distance. We might see king e8. That's what we do see. And I suspect that Naroditsky is in great shape. Rook c1. I really, really like this idea. King d5 is going to be played, and black can try to advance a pawn, but it's not so easy. Knight e4 is controlling that square with two squares, so we see the pawn dropping, king c5, and we might see yet another draw here. It's one pawn and a knight, but there's no way to make progress. Great play.
And this is our closest semi-final, closest quarter-final so far. Thrilling stuff. Dania still has a 3.5 lead, so 2 points away from making the semi-final, but Josef is absolutely capable of winning a game or two.
Yeah, I mean,
or three.
I mean, it really is incredible stuff in terms of this match so far.
Yeah.
I mean, and we're seeing here a bit of an unconventional opening choice from Josef, but I think once again, one of the things that has impressed me is he's gotten great positions out of the opening against Naroditsky, and that is easier said than done. I mean, Naroditsky is a 2600 plus grandmaster, so he is incredibly well versed in the opening. But Josef has held his own. He has a lovely center here. He's got the bishop pair, and I actually prefer the black position here. White is fighting against that bishop, but what we're probably going to see is Josef eventually playing f5, h6. The idea is to control that g5 square. Rook e8 supporting, and the black strategy is involving pushing these pawns. We're probably going to see d3, and we'll see e4 as well. And now bishop takes d4 is a possibility. The thing is, a little bit of hesitation. Beautiful move. Bishop takes d4, queen takes b7 though, pawn takes, the rook will be hit. You don't have time. Excellent play. We might see king g8. We see rook c7 or rook b8 chasing after this pawn. And knight b5. If you take the pawn, knight d6. Look at the resourcefulness of Naroditsky. Incredible resourceful. Anyone else would have, or almost anyone else would have lost an exchange somewhere. I mean, but somehow he finds a way. h5, very nice idea. F takes e4, bishop h6, going after this pawn, which is the only blockader of black's best pawn in the position. This pawn on d3, bishop f4 more than likely. We're going to see a bishop move again. The pawn on f5 drops, however, and Dania gets this square. Bishop e3 will force a rook and pawn endgame, but white is out of the woods. He had so many problems. The question is time.
Black is still the one pressing though, but yeah, time is equal, so I very much suspect, unless they agree a draw again, and there we go.
These players are professionals. They don't want to. I like it though, because they're not trying to win on the clock. They're saying, if this is a draw, let's go. Let's go again. Excellent.
Couldn't agree more with the chat. Very competitive match. Now 5-4 to Naroditsky, but Yeah, incredibly close, and not just the closest, also by far the longest match. Remember, to anyone watching, in 11 minutes is the first semi-final, Magnus Carlsen against Andrew Tang, aka Penguin. So we're only gonna have a minute to catch our breath, Alex.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I think just the adrenaline will keep us going. Yeah. And then the crash, we better not crash on stream, guys, because this is so intense. I'm personally loving this bullet format. So hope to see more of these initiatives in the future. But for now, let's focus on this game where Naroditsky, he's got a 7-second lead in this position. He's got equal material, but I like Naroditsky's position. White managed to recover the pawn in this way, but the queen is a little bit out of play, and the white king is not.
Those bishops.
But you have to be careful. The bishops might look strong, but this bishop on b6 is a monster. The knight on f5 is a monster. And we actually see Joseph exchanging and bishop e3. Going for more exchanges, but it comes at a price. Queen b3 will be able to defend everything, so he's able to hold things. So we might see another quick professional draw, but
this time there's a big time difference.
Pawn on a2, queen here. However, can you recover with the queen? Queen check, king g7. So we definitely see that there's an intention to win. Queen a3 is likely here, just to protect the pawn and prevent c5 advances. The important detail: if you exchange everything, d6, the king will catch the pawn. So you cannot do that. Queen c5 played, really interesting move. You cannot exchange the queens, I think, because this pawn is uncatchable. So we see queen e7 and the pawn on c4 drops.
The problem is e5. He was gonna give a check on f4.
Yeah. Oh wait, this is a mistake. h4 could have been taken here with check. Missed by Naroditsky. I'm surprised.
He's hanging again.
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised because he could have collected it. He collected there. Queen d4 with check available, and time. Time is the killer there. 6-4, and now that was such a huge game because now we need to see Joseph. Win on the man with the black pieces.
2 games, yeah.
2 games, yeah, but 2 games in a row. He will have white on the second one, but here he really needs something. And Naroditsky can use that to his advantage. We might see a little bit of a difference in the opening approach, less ambitious, a bit of a calmer position. I'm not so sure. He has given something he's got a lovely position, white, but he does have some opportunities. If you're black, b6, trying to develop this bishop, the opportunities come against these weak pawns. Knight g5, a very typical idea. He says, you're going to move the bishop there. Those pawns are going to be in a little bit of danger. That's why we kick out the knight first before developing the bishop. Rook c8, completing the development. Bishop a2, stepping out of the way of the x-ray. Knight e7, a lot of really sort of professional play here, maneuvering excellently both players. The pawn on c3 could be taken, but you don't really want to do that because you'll be pinning into your queen. Knight f4 was pressing here. White, that's what provoked white into playing f3. Knight d6, big move, hitting this, and you want to take this bishop. Queen takes a4, spotting that the bishop is undefended, but the rook on d8 is undefended, so the transaction has cost black an exchange. Not necessarily a disaster because these pawns are a little bit weak.
The problem is that black needs to win.
That's the big problem, yeah. Objectively, if a draw was fine, I think black would be okay. Rook d7, something like this, defending, but when you don't have a clock time edge, you're definitely in a little bit of danger. On the other hand, these pawns that have been advanced, a little bit unsafe. The black king is safer, and king safety matters a lot in bullet because you can check people and you can cause them to burn time. They have to defend against threats. So we see a lot of practical possibilities. But white, what Daniel Naroditsky is doing excellently is he's keeping the clock situation really a problem for Joseph, who is going to have to start making something with the position soon. So we see the sacrifice of the h-pawn, but white sort of returning the favor. Rook h2 was combining here. Rook h4, trying to win this pawn. We see rook f1 defending, rook g4 check, collecting, but this is a huge achievement for Joseph. He's got the king locked in. I'm a little bit surprised at that move. I would have tried to maneuver the queen backward.
Get the queen in. The queen.
But the queen has broken in, and we see this position. But huge achievement here for Naroditsky, who got one pair of rooks off the board, and now it's really all about the clock time. 5 seconds each. Who can make this? Who is faster? Naroditsky has shown he's the faster one so far. He's showing it again. He's got 4 seconds against 3.6, and I think we're going to see easier play. Queens can come off the board. He goes for the check to burn more time. He gets this huge check. More checks. The queen is hanging. The queen was hanging, but Joseph does not spot it too much. Naroditsky, a sigh of relief, and he goes through 7-4.
He is true, but there will be a drawing of lots for who starts with white. But yeah, did they? Okay, they are off.
So Magnus straight away, just a mouse slip, I think, and all of a sudden Penguin is already up a piece here as black. And we're seeing a collapse here of the center. Magnus is gonna scramble to bring his pieces up. He's still playing. Why not play? It's bullet. Anything can happen, but you're up a piece. If you're Penguin here, you're pretty happy. b3, trying to defend, but it does give a square. The rook on a1 is available, is there for the taking. Penguin goes for it. He's now up a full rook. And I wouldn't be surprised, as long as Penguin stays calm and plays good moves over the next 5-6 moves, we could see a very early resignation here from Magnus. Well, rook d8, defending. Magnus is fighting with knight d6, but nice combination. Queen takes and queen takes d6. Would have simplified, and Magnus says, I'm down a rook. Penguin is an absolutely amazing bullet player. Let's take it to game 2.
Penguin takes the lead. Let's get one of my mods to maybe do a poll. I'm curious on this one. What do people think? Who will go through, Magnus or Alireza? I'll leave it up to...
Penguin.
Huh? So let's...
Magnus or Penguin?
Yeah, Magnus or Penguin. What did I say, Alireza? Magnus...
Oh, another one of the pieces! Twice back to back he's pre-moved. And look at Andrew Tang, you can see he's kind of smiling. And it's already game 3. It's game 3. Oh my god.
Incredible stuff. I don't know what to say. I thought, let's get this poll going. But Andrew Tang takes a 2-0 lead. Magnus does not look happy. He will need to refocus very quickly, because we said best of 12 is a very, very quick match. If Magnus does not get, and Andrew, as we mentioned, he is one of the best bullet players in the world, and he will make the most out of this 2-0 gifted lead.
Yeah, it was just a bad pre-move twice in a row. I've never seen that before. 2 games in a row, dropping a piece like that. And it happened so fast, I'm not even sure, was it some kind of trickery from Penguin in terms of an unusual move order, or was it just a mouse, or what could it have been? But queen b3, queen takes b2. These rooks are dropping. This rook is dropping, but it's a fair trade. Rook takes c7. Magnus has the bishop pair. He is down a pawn, but he's got more active pieces. Bishop b8 is a move that I think is very, very strong, defending the pawn. And knight c3, just giving up this rook. Maybe there was something there that we missed, but it looks to me like Penguin is just dominating this third game. Is he about to take a 3-game lead? The only thing that is in Magnus's favor is the 13 seconds on the clock. But remember, Penguin is the fastest man alive.
3-0.
That's 3-0 for Penguin. We could see an absolutely massive upset here. And
what
Magnus,
is going on? What are we witnessing?
Well, the focus on Magnus's face right now, but he needs a result in this game.
I mean, I saw in the chat someone said that Magnus might be having issues with the mouse. He also, he had some... Saturday was not his best titled arena, but he is today in a different setting. The arena he was playing from the office Spiel offices, so it's definitely not the setup, but who knows what's going on there.
The only thing that's working out here for Magnus right now is that he has got off to a great start in this position here. He's up a pawn. White has recovered the pawn, but this knight here is a little bit awkward. It's pinned. Also this knight on b5. It's hard to imagine how those pieces are going to get back into the game. h5. You don't have rook c1, by the way, because you can just take and there will be mating threats. After bishop here, we see knight c3. You cannot take like this because the queen hangs, and there's a lot of threats. There's knight e2 check. There's the knight takes b1. So queen a6, trying to mix up the position. Queen b7, attacking here, making it more complicated. That's exactly what you're supposed to do in these situations. Make it complicated. Hope that your opponent goes wrong and gives you a chance. In this case, maybe Magnus has gone wrong, I'm not sure, because queen takes b1 is an option. He goes a different direction, he gives a check and then takes with the rook. Still, Penguin is fighting an uphill battle. The pieces are all very uncoordinated. Knight b6 you can take here, but the idea is that I will capture back. Rook c1 going on the offensive, and knight d5 we see pressure against the bishop, defending the pawn on e7, and all of the white pieces are here and you can coordinate an attack. Queen d1, that's what's happening. h4 is the kind of move that black would love to play. Bishop f6, we're seeing h4, and queen here is going to be mate.
And Magnus gets on the scoreboard much needed victory, and he pulls it back to 3-1. But still a big 2-point lead for Penguin. So let's see game number 5 already. It's been all going so fast.
Simply incredible. We're seeing here very classical play, an Italian game. Magnus on the white side. Magnus is, I think, maybe the greatest player maybe of all time in 1e45 positions. Of course, players like Anatoly Karpov might have a different opinion of this, or Kramnik, but he's an excellent player. in these kind of positions, especially from the black side, but of course also from the white side. And here he's put Penguin in trouble. b6 is a beautiful move. You have to take with the pawn because otherwise the rook was hanging. And now queen b2, queen here. Penguin spits back that pawn, but the idea is you couldn't take immediately because bishop takes f2. I know bishop takes f2 was supporting there. My apologies. Queen goes back to b3 to defend the pawn and attack on e6. That's why the queen goes here. Knight f5 ideas are in the air, but for now he breaks in the center. He's got a better center than black. Black's knight is not where it wants to be. The bishop is pinned. Magnus is in great shape. He's stepped the king away so that there are no x-ray problems, no tactical problems.
Andrew has also had to invest so much time into defending this position. He's down 15 seconds on the clock.
Yeah, you have to say Magnus is in great shape here. Might he even reroute a piece onto f6? Maybe that's a little bit too slow of a maneuver. He might go rook d6 and try to pile up the rooks like this. Pressure against d6. For now, he threatens queen f7. The queen on g4 does a wonderful job of pressing both of these points. And the pawn drops. Knight takes g6, but Penguin is going all in with this pawn. I think knight takes g6 is going to be seen on the board very soon. He goes for a different tactic. He collects 2 minor pieces for the rook, brings back the knight to f3 so that he can threaten to take the pawn. This pawn has been captured, but still, this pawn is very, very annoying if you're Magnus. And rook here, queen check, knight here. The point is, if you take, I might even, at some point go knight f6 and 3 seconds on the clock against 18.
Nice game by Magnus.
Magnus is back in at 3-2.
Alex, you've been given a new nickname. Alex Slim Shady Astani.
I'm not sure how I feel about that, but yeah, it's just incredibly exciting stuff. Magnus has picked up a pawn, by the way, here. It's, when you're commentating Bullet of these players, the best you can do is just rattle out as many words as possible as you can and hope you catch some of what they're thinking, because they just play so fast. There's so many ideas, and it's just difficult to keep up. Here we see the pawn on e5 has already dropped. So Penguin did a great job of recovering the pawn, but the pawn on c4 is dropping, and Magnus, I think, is in great shape here.
Yeah, if he pulls this one back, the match is already tied 3-3. So, and Penguin with the white pieces will really be looking to hold on, because he got off to such a great start with a lot of gifts, a lot of bad pre-moves by Magnus, but...
Wait a second, that's a big pawn. Maybe he thought he couldn't take it because bishop takes, but actually you had that knight hanging, and not only would you not lose a piece, you'd win one. So bishop e7 played, rook d8 is the intention to bring more pieces into play. Bishop g5, Magnus is just flooding the white position with pieces. Knight d5, you have to see, look at the control of the center.
That's a full rook.
And that's going to be a full rook, and I think Penguin might resign. Yeah, he does resign.
And the match is tied.
Magnus
3-3. Back to square zero.
This may surprise people, but it turns out it's quite tricky to put a player like Magnus away. Yeah, I mean, Magnus is not only the world champion, #1 player, arguably the best of all time, but he is also so clutch. We saw that recently in his Carlsen Nakamura match, a famous match that many people watched online, and we're seeing it here, recovering that 3-point deficit.
Now with the white pieces, and I already like his position, a bit more space in the center, and he goes for the sacrifice on g5. Very interesting.
Wow, I did not expect that. That's very, very risky. Maybe he saw something that he didn't like in the alternatives, or maybe he's just saying he's confident, he's won 3 in a row, and he wants to put the squeeze on Penguin. Here he's pushing the pawn, but I'm not sure. There definitely is a lot of compensation, but Penguin has very nice pieces. He's got a lot of pieces around, and bishop here, incredible move. The point is, you can take, but queen g5 in the end is going to be a problem. So Penguin goes in a different direction, but I like what Penguin's done. He's picked up this piece, and the bishop on g7, it's good, but at the same time, it's very hard to attack the king, and that's an extra piece. This knight on d5 is a full extra piece. Penguin is in control in this game.
There was a poll at the top. Can Magnus come back? The viewers believe 69%. It's not a huge, so some people believe in Penguin, but the majority thinks Magnus can come back. He already has. The match score is tied, and this is a big game now.
Yeah, d5, by the way, really nice move from Magnus, holding onto the base of the pawn. You have to be careful, because if this pawn drops, rook c2, we might see at some point, if the pawn drops, you're in trouble. But Magnus is distracting his opponent here. He's got 3 against 1. He'd love to do something. Rook e4 check looks to me like a possibility. Oh, no, but the bishop was defended by the rook. Apologies. So knight goes to f4. White is trying to use these pawns to his advantage. He's going to try and go rook d7 and g5, but you cannot hang on to the g5 pawn. Rook h8 is a threat of mate.
Is there a mate
but
threat?
I think there's a threat of mate right here. That's why Penguin reacts. Bishop e3, controlling this knight. Rook g4, so that when that falls, the rook doesn't fall. 4 seconds against 9. The question is, can Magnus put the squeeze on against... He's got the time advantage, but Penguin is the fastest player in the world. Penguin will convert 2.6 seconds. Magnus
resigns even.
Yeah,
and that tells you just how fast is Penguin. For Magnus to resign with 2 seconds, these two, as you can see, they have played almost 1,000 games, so they have plenty, they know each other well, and Magnus shows a sign of respect and of showing, you know, I know Andrew's got this, an eternity for Penguin, indeed.
Yeah.
And Penguin takes the lead again, 4-3. What a game, what a semi-final.
Incredible. Incredible. And just at the moment that you thought, okay, this is now Magnus time, Penguin strikes. And with these relatively short matches, well, Magnus is under pressure here. He has to score something, but he's in great shape. All of his pieces are better than Penguin's minor pieces here. The bishop on f6 is an excellent piece. Hitting this knight, the pawns are a little bit loose. So if Magnus plays accurately here, I can see it going very, very wrong very quickly for Penguin. E4 is a nice move. White tries to keep things shut down with f4. I like this a6 though. The knight has to step back to d4. Black is grabbing space in the center, grabbing space in the queen side. Now the c4 square has dropped, and that's what we're seeing. The knight was under fire. Knight on c4 is going to be a lot of problems because this bishop and this is attacked. Penguin goes for some tactical ideas, but we're going to see bishop takes d4. You don't want g4 because queen g3 check was a possibility there. Queen g3 anyway, hitting this rook. And I don't know, we might see rook e8, we might see d2, the pawn actually drops, the bishop is under fire, and I think there's going to be some kind of tactical combination. Magnus is looking for the kill here. King takes f1 in order to prevent, but I think rook takes c3, bishop check. Beautiful move here. You cannot take because pawn takes, the bishop hangs in the end. Rook takes and queen e3 is the threat. We can take like this, the queen, everything is defended. Magnus is up a piece, bishop check. Beautiful, because if you take the bishop, rook c1 is mate.
And we're tied again, 4-4. Magnus with the white pieces. Can he take the lead for the first time in this match? We shall find out. We shall find out.
Incredible stuff. Knight b5 is the threat there. Stopped. Bishop b3 is trying to step that knight to c4. We might see knight to e3 trying to take use of these squares. Knight h4 trying to take use of the square f5. Maybe a4 to try and break into the king side. We've got a really interesting position on our hands with opposite side castling. We do see that a4 and exchange. We might even see some sacrifice, but black is counteracting in the center. We do see that sacrifice. Careful with queen c4. There were bishop takes f2 ideas. Queen here. Queen b7. You have to say, overall, I like Penguin's defense of the position, but the white pieces are still quite strong. The knight will have to be stepped back. f5 at some point will happen, but the king is bare for quite a long time.
Can the king try and run to the king side?
Overall, I think it's anybody's game here, but I like Magnus all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Rook a1, bishop a7 is a huge threat. Be careful because of background threats. We might see h3 because, for example, bishop a7 takes. Bishop a7 though, king b7, necessary. Queen a6 check is a possibility, but Penguin does not see the finish, and maybe Magnus doesn't either. King c7, maybe it's relatively safe, but this is huge now. Rook b1. The problem is you cannot take though because rook d1 checks, so Penguin has time. He's going into the tank because he needs to find a move, a useful move. He finds rook a8, but now you can take the queen. Now you can take the queen because there is no back rank mate. Magnus is taking his time. Bishop c5, but now you cannot take the queen. But you can take this rook instead. Okay, this is too much. These guys are such monsters. And Magnus, for the first time in the match, 5-4.
Takes the lead, 5-4. Magnus is just a point and a half away from reaching the final. Penguin, this is a big game. He with the white pieces, he must be looking for a win here. All in all, I think Magnus has been the dominating player in this final. The first two losses were just piece drops, inexplicable piece drops. But since then, Magnus has definitely turned on beast mode.
This is an interesting decision by Penguin. He grabbed the pawn on e5. Knight f3 check, winning the queen here. Magnus wins the queen. The question is, do you capture with the queen or with the rook? Rook exchange and bishop takes queen. This position is very, very good for Magnus, who might even go rook d8, not afraid of the pins here. That's exactly what he goes for. The thing is, you cannot take twice because bishop takes h7 is the typical tactical sacrifice. Maybe we're going to see some knight h5. Knight e8, really nice move. The knight falls because the rook is pinned. Penguin got a little bit greedy with that pawn on a6, and we're going to see a victory from Magnus here unless something very strange happens. Penguin does not even try, and this is huge.
Tough spell for Penguin. Magnus now takes the lead 6-4.
And look at the opening. Oh. Fiona, your
my
favorite.
The ring gambit. Go Magnus.
Oh! The rook drops! The rook drops. Magnus stoic. Penguin cannot be happy, and it's Penguin's turn to return. And remember, Magnus only needs a draw in order to go through. This would be nothing short of a miracle. Will save Penguin.
Incredible. But what? I mean, I have to say also kudos. I think this one we are going to commentate the end of it, but Penguin needs nothing short of a miracle here. let's remind everyone, he needs a win. A draw is not enough. Magnus only needs a draw to advance. But Magnus has been, you know, really incredible. Like the way he fought back after going down 3-0.
And the bishop is dropping, by the way. That's a rook and a bishop. Penguin is playing out of sheer desperation, but we might even see a resignation. What can you do? There are no tricks. The king is safe. You're going to lose this bishop, and there we go. Penguin gives up on this game.
Let's see. I think one of the things that people, and they are off, I was gonna say, I think a lot of people would love to see an Alireza versus Magnus final. Game aborted. I guess they played with the wrong color. We shall see what happens. But yeah, I think a lot of players would love to see a rematch of Magnus versus Alireza from the Banter Blitz final, the Banter Blitz Cup on Chess 24, where Alireza got the better of Magnus. And so will we see a rematch? We're about to find out. They are off. Alireza has the white pieces in the first game.
And Naroditsky going for the Shigorin, a combative opening straight off the bat. So he's showing that even with the black pieces, he's going to take the game to Alireza. Black has actually forced white to maneuver a lot with his knight. And you have to say, white's position is quite nice, or black's position is quite nice, but knight f4 is a nice touch, getting rid of pieces. You take my queen, I take your queen. In the end, both sides have a minor piece. f5 is dangerous against possible bishop c4 ideas. Knight now going to b6, preventing this. But one of the things I suddenly like Alireza's position a lot more. He's got the bishop pair, he's got this center, and his development problems have been solved. I think it's advantage on position, advantage Alireza right now. The pawn on c4 was hanging, but this position is very, very awkward. If you just drop the bishop back to c1, the idea is the knight can move forward to d3. Otherwise, you would lose the pawn. Knight d3, though, chasing that pawn. And I like Alireza's position. What are you going to do about this pawn? I don't see a way to defend it. You can try to mix things up. He goes for b5. He just accepts the fact that the pawn cannot be saved. The one thing that Alireza now will probably proceed to do is try to advance the pawns on the light squares. This is very typical because this is the only way that white can use his majority here, which is in the center. Knight e5, you cannot take the knight because the rook was hanging. Knight goes back to c4. And now we see the push of the pawn, rook check, disimproving the king. The king stands better in the center. However, having to advance the pawn like this, having forced that, is a sort of positional strategic victory for black, because now it's very difficult to push these pawns because black owns the light squares. However, has this pawn dropped? I believe it has. And now that's actually 2 pawns, and suddenly Alireza is in control. That's a third pawn.
And the king is in a mating now.
Yes, and rook f4. Game over. It happens so fast, and that's Alireza. He just spots everything with such incredible speed, and he takes the first game.
Incredible. So 1-0 to Alireza. Can Naroditsky bounce back with the white pieces?
Well, it's a c3 Sicilian. At the highest levels of over-the-board classical chess, maybe it's a solid opening, but in Bullet, it's quite a combative opening. You get this isolated queen's pawn. Means that a lot of endgames are going to be worse for you, but middle games tend to favor you. So Naroditsky is definitely fighting here. He gets this square on d6, this beautiful square. The knight is supported, and black definitely doesn't want to give up his bishop. White would then have the bishop pair and a really strong pawn, but this knight is, sometimes some people call it an octopus. When that knight hits the 6th rank, it's a very annoying piece. Now, bishop takes d5. The question is, that'll be black's best piece, and whoa, Naroditsky had pre-moved that exchange sacrifice, and I think Alireza, anticipating that, prepared this little kind of pre-move trick. Naroditsky is still in control, but I think Alireza is going to be able to move this position towards very, very drawn territory. Why I say that Naroditsky is in control, he is up a pawn, and he gets that rook on the 7th. That's a huge bit of sort of strategic success. Black now has to deal with this. He might go for some bishop f1 counterplay here on g2, but the black king is very, very unsafe, and bishop f1 with that rook here, you can always deal with that. So that's what we're seeing. We're going to see d7. How do you stop the pawn? You have to go rook here, but bishop f6 is going to support the pawn. That's a really nice trick. King g3, not interested in the bishop. I want this pawn to cost you a full rook, and that's going to convert. I don't see any way to prevent this. Black is going for counterplay, but suddenly there's a queen on the board. White's king has more than enough squares.
And Alireza resigns.
Alireza resigns. It's 1-1, and we might be headed for another tense affair from start to finish. Third game. It's a King's Indian on the board.
Absolutely. And an attacking opening from white here. He's going for the throw, just pushing those pawns forward on the king side, h4, g4. And it's gonna be a very chances for both sides, but
this is a move that I like to see. If I'm black here, white has to give up this strong dark squared bishop. Usually you don't want to do that because then this piece becomes really, really strong. But the point was, Naroditsky had seen that king on e1, had seen this x-ray, and had seen all of this combination, and he's really doing this. He's really taking the game. White has to castle into this danger. c-file, the pawn falls. You cannot take the queen. King b1. Now you can take the queen. You could go queen b3. I really like this move. I like Naroditsky's position. So much pressure from all of his pieces. He goes rook here. Threat is queen takes a3. But for now, the bishop has to be defended. Bishop defended. Now queen takes a3 is a threat as far as I can tell. Will he grab the pawn? He does grab the pawn. And maybe knight b5 was a little trick. Maybe knight b5, but queen takes b2, queen takes, bishop takes. It might have been something like that Alireza thought there was a trick and then realized there wasn't. Something along those lines could have happened. Well, that's just guesswork, really. Now the question is, will Alireza take that pawn? He doesn't want to. He wants to keep lines a little bit closed. And rook c8, bringing more pieces to bear. This is a free attack. Black actually has a good material situation, and he breaks that down, and that was incredible. That was an amazing game from Naroditsky. 2-1 to Naroditsky.
Yeah. And a big win, because so far it is a win with the black pieces. I think all day long it hasn't mattered so much. We haven't seen a game, but here, okay, they exchanged blows with the white pieces, and to get a
Alireza, though, maybe has tricked Naroditsky a little bit, and now Alireza gets the kind of position that Naroditsky had in the last game. Although one difference is that white can castle and he'll be more or less safe. But what a position to get with the black pieces. All your pieces are very strong. Knight is coming to e4. And this might cost you some material. I think white is going to have to sacrifice the queen. That's exactly what he does. Knight f6 check is going to come in here. You can win this rook. Black re-sacrifices. And in the end, it's as simple as that, Fiona. We're into a rook and drawn, a boring game and drawn rook and bishop endgame. What can be said? But some player, white has offered draws and those have been declined. So Alireza wants a win here, but black offered a draw then, and white declined it. So maybe the tables have turned, and it's white who feels he can press. And why not? White does have an extra pawn. He's putting everything on dark squares. Opposite color bishops are famous for being very, very drawish. However, white will try to use this extra pawn. Why not? The question is, though, be very careful, because white now offers a draw, says, look, we've got 27 seconds on clock. I know it's a draw, and I respect that, Alireza. I respect your speed, respect your quality. I'm not going to try and push my luck here.
So a first draw in the second semi-final. Naroditsky still with the 1 point lead, and we once again see Alireza throwing the pawns up.
Same trick was available there, but the pawn on g6 was hanging, so you needed to take care of that. Now black is trying to complete his development, but once again, white is castling into some sort of danger. But I like white's position a lot more than before. He keeps the c-file shut down, and we're even going to see maybe the knight e7 check looks quite strong to me. King f7, you can grab this pawn, but he goes a different direction. Knight f3, maybe he was worried about this pawn on f2 dropping. And there's even, if you can put the knight on g5, then there would even be mating threats. Black maneuvers with check, gaining time, putting the knight on a beautiful square, hitting the queen, and forcing that knight to drop. But we do see that sequence that we were talking about, perhaps rook takes h7. The point is, if you take that knight, the bishop is hanging. This exchange happens, the knight returns to d5. I like very much Alireza's position, because black's king is going to be in trouble. c4, c5 is a really good move, trying to bring that bishop in. Knight f4, and now that's crushing, because bishop takes his force, queen takes, and now the king is so bare. Knight takes g6 would hit the rook and also create a threat of mate. He goes a different direction, queen e7, takes, and I think he will just play the practical approach, and he will convert this endgame. We see a lot of pawns here, and this extra material is just not enough. He might even exchange here and go into a winning rook takes bishop, winning king and pawn endgame. That's what he does. He takes the practical approach. You cannot do much with your majority while these three pawns are going to completely overrun the black king. We're going to see black desperately trying to make something. Of course, there are some ideas with b4 and c3, but it's a net 2-pawn majority, which in endgames means it's very, very difficult to make use of it. b4, the idea is to take white. Oh, white does not take. I'm a little bit surprised, but what do I know? I think now b3 ideas maybe were...
What's going on here? And Alireza's time. Under 3 seconds.
Whoa! And he's going to queen. Naroditsky wins that.
Unbelievable. What a huge win for now. What even happened there?
I thought it was just an easy win. That's what I thought it was an easy win. I think Alireza did too, because he was crushing it. He exchanged rook for bishop, and Naroditsky, so tricky, so incredibly tricky. And he somehow manages to promote, even though he he had less pawns. This is very, very
suddenly
crazy.
it's a 2-point lead for Naroditsky. 3.5, 1.5. And the white pieces.
Wow, Alireza is up against it. Yes, the white pieces. So Alireza will need to make something happen here. But I love Naroditsky's position. This knight on e5 is a monster, well supported. Queen coming to e2. Probably you're going to move that rook to d1. And white is trying to fight against that, kicking the knight back. Or black, rather, is trying to fight against that. He kicks the knight back successfully. Bishop f6. I'm starting to like Alireza's position a little bit more. But wait a second. Queen takes d5. The knight on c5 is undefended. You cannot move it because the bishop is also hanging. So what do? Do you go passive with a move like queen c8? Well, maybe b4 or bishop f2 will undermine this. Knight d6 is a threat. Bishop a6 was that missed, however. Bishop a6 may have been missed. I know the knight on c4 does manage to defend here.
Alireza is down on the clock again.
Down a huge amount on the clock. Down a huge amount. He goes h5. A little bit of an unusual move. Knight b7. Nice resource. Otherwise, you would have lost material because your rook was also hit. We're going to see that exchange happening here. Knight takes f5. Maybe on the cards because if you take, the knight is falling. Naroditsky plays it. Queen e5. Maybe we're going to see knight to d4 or some kind of square like this. That's what we see. And black is going to go for some kind of counterplay. Maybe he'll take here and try to generate some counterplay. Queen d3, forcing the queens off the board. There were too many threats here. And we're seeing a king and pawn endgame where, once again, Naroditsky's in great shape. He's up a pawn. And on top of that, he's up so much time on the clock. And Alireza needs nothing short of a miracle. He's won a second pawn. He's objectively winning. Can Alireza somehow outpace Naroditsky? Naroditsky's one of the fastest players on the planet. I don't think he's going to get there. 7 seconds against 4. And this is going to cost him a rook. It's a queen on the board. It costs him the rook. Nothing to do. Alireza moving his king. 5 seconds, 4 seconds. Alireza gives up.
And Alireza, we saw a smile there on his face. But more a smile of, like, what's going on here? As Daniel Naroditsky takes a 4.5, 1.5 lead, huge lead in this situation. Daniel Naroditsky is 2 points away from qualifying to the final where Magnus Carlsen awaits. I need some water too. This is incredible.
Yeah, I mean, Naroditsky's play has just been phenomenal so far, and Alireza really needs to make something with the white pieces here in this game. He's probably going to break in the center, try to use that bishop pair. I like his position for now. Black doesn't have any counter breaks himself. He puts the rook on d1. Black sidesteps these x-rays. The pawn on c7 is a little bit shaky. Black goes c6, kicking out that strong knight, but now the break d5 is very good because when you take, this pawn is now weak. All of the black pawns are quite weak, and it has to be said, in a must-win situation, Alireza has got the kind of position that he wants here. He keeps the pressure alive. Bishop a3, c4. You're probably going to see one of these breaks, b5 or c5. Black trying to find some counterplay. Will we see f5 and trying to get that rook playing against this knight? Beautiful idea from Naroditsky, costing the bishop here, giving up a pawn. But now this bishop becomes really a monster because it doesn't have a dark square counterpart.
And look at the clock situation again. Daniel is up 10 seconds on the clock.
Yeah, the question is, maybe could there be some kind of slight. Oh, knight e3, huge move. You couldn't take it because queen takes g3, and Daniel has just turned the slightly bad position into a winning position here. A total exchange, and that's crushing because bishop f4, that's the reason you couldn't take that. You're up in exchange. The king steps out of all the nasty checks. Bishop e4 trying to grab this pawn so you can make something of these pawns. But once the pawn on b4 falls, it's very difficult. f6 is a threat. Bishop d4 stopping that. That is the last great hope for white. The time situation. Alireza needs to make something happen here. He's losing this knight. He goes for bishop c4, goes for some trickery, loses everything, resigns. 5.5, 1.5. What a scoreline.
And Alireza, once again, you didn't see, but he sort of leaned back and laughed on, almost in disbelief, while Daniel has been very focused, very calm and focused. I mean, he is putting on such a beastly performance. 5.5 versus 1.5. He's just 1 point away from making it to the final.
Yeah, and you see the confidence in his face. You see, I mean, he's been playing great chess. Now he can offer. He's offering Alireza the option. Let's draw. Knight h5, queen f3. They did that once. There's a rule in chess, threefold repetition. Certainly, Alireza doesn't want that, but f5, be careful, because the queen cannot stay on the g-file, and Alireza has snapped up a piece here and goes bishop g5 check. Really nice. If you took that, there was this drop.
We saw a reaction from Daniel there, sort of lifting his eyes to the sky. And Alireza, I mean, I think it is already pretty much must-win territory here for Alireza. He really needs to get his momentum back and stack up, you know, a few wins if he wants to stand a chance to come back.
For sure, but once again, Daniel making it so tricky and a 10-second edge on the clock. It's possible that Alireza is not going to convert even though he is up a full piece here. And this would be, I mean, knight d6, look at that trickery. You know, you're ignoring this rook. Daniel is such a great offensive player. We see queen takes c2 is in the cards, but this bishop is dropped. And look at Alireza. And look at Daniel. Daniel knows how huge that game was. Alireza just sort of laughing a little bit, and I mean,
Daniel is so pumped. And we see Alireza. Alireza is out, and I'm gonna give Daniel some privacy as well. But this is what we are going to get in the final. Daniel Naroditsky against Magnus Carlsen. It will start 15 minutes from now. Is that Let me just, I think Magnus, they are off. Rebecca Harris has the white pieces in the first game, and what's it gonna be? Magnus narrowly won the pole, but we just saw a demolition job from Naroditsky against Alireza. Can he do it one more time?
Well, same 12 game, same match format, and I think it's anybody's game.
Huh?
Okay, so I mean, anything can happen. Black in this first game here. Magnus Carlsen, we are watching it from his perspective, seems to be off to a very good start. He's got more space here in the center. He might put a rook on e3 at some point. Instead, he chooses to exchange. But in general, he is very, very safe here. Material is equal. But that extra space does give you a little bit more chances. White, however, shuts things down. Seems to have actually calmed the problems, managed to exchange a lot of pieces, and now, well, Magnus does signal the intention to continue to play on. But I think Naroditsky is a lot more comfortable. And again, Naroditsky has impressed not just with his play, but with his speed. And we're seeing here that he certainly has an edge. Now, Black has a lot more space in this position, but the problem is it's also very, very locked down. How do you make progress? And
is there a way?
I don't see a way, and it seems, judging by the fact that they repeated, that the players don't either. So that's a first round draw. Not a result that Magnus will mind, because he does have the white pieces now.
Look at how many players the games. Look at how many games the players have played. By the way, over 300 games against each other. The first one was squared, and here Magnus now with the white pieces.
Yeah, and Magnus with the white pieces, he's going for a little bit of a calm, conservative setup. Daniel Naroditsky, he is such an incredible tactical player that it may be a decision, a conscious decision. Let's just make it. Let's make it a relatively calm position. And White again going for the same approach that we saw in the first game, grabbing space. So Magnus has managed to grab more space here on the queen side.
Did I say over 300? My apologies. The honorary. That was misspoken. My maths are just about good enough to figure out that 500 plus 300 is more than 300. Over 800 games against each other.
And here we see that Magnus, who definitely has the lifetime edge against Danya, is doing great here. But queen e2 check, missed. You cannot go queen f2 because this drops. And so Danya is able to collect this pawn. It's a huge pawn. But wait a second, the knight on f6 was dropping. Now you do get a lot of checks and a lot of pawns. But is it going to be enough? Queen takes e4. We see queen f3. Black will probably choose to keep the queens on the board, but that c6 pawn does drop as a result. I'm not so sure if that is such a great situation. White is up a piece, but no pawns in front of his king. This pawn on a7, how much of a factor will that decide? The queen is really, really well placed. Bishop drops back to g1. We do have knight g3 check though. Queen takes, queen b8 check is an option. Queen g2 actually was a double attack. This pawn is going to decide the game. That's going to be game over. Magnus collecting the point. It all happened so fast, but Magnus also pressing on the clock.
Big reaction once again from Daniel, who's not happy, but Magnus super focused. They both clearly want this very much.
Later in an endgame with double pawns. Rook e8, just trying to bring the rook into play. One of the key decisions is where are we going to get this bishop? Huge move, huge sequence of combination. Amazing sequence there. But wait a second, did he trick himself? Rook e5.
Look at the player's reaction.
I don't think Magnus had seen any of that idea, but then the queen got trapped. And both players, Danya kind of has this smile on his face like, oh my god, I played an amazing tactic. And in the end, the world champion sort of escapes. And now, with 2 minor pieces against the rook, Magnus is in control. The pawn on b3 will fall because the rook was attacked. The pawn is dropped. a4. We see bishop c5. We're going to see b5, and that pawn majority is going to be tried to be used. Maybe we're going to move that knight to c4 to put pressure here, or simply Magnus goes for the more direct approach, and after c takes b4, knight c1 decides the game. Very nasty fork, and we see Magnus, he's up 2 games already, and Danya needs to get into the match ASAP. We see a Spanish on the board here. Naroditsky, an expert, but Magnus, arguably the world's best in these kind of positions. Well, the world's best full stop, but in these positions, maybe the absolute greatest of all time, these e4, e5 positions. Then again, let's see what Naroditsky can do. The game has shifted to something more aggressive. White with his pawn on h5, understandably wants to attack. Black is breaking in the center. Black will keep his options. d4, hitting the knight on the pawn. That's a really, really nice move. You don't really want to take because now this pawn is weak. Black has had to give up this knight because of the attack on the queen, and I really like Magnus's position here. He's in control, he's picked up a pawn, and all of the pieces are just very, very strong. And Black's pawn on g5, that may in the future become a target. Rook d3, by the way, preventing this tactical idea, and Black goes all in. He wants f5, he wants to attack in the center. That's where he has his best placed pieces, but Magnus not afraid of this attack. Knight goes to d5, and there's another exchange. Magnus is in control. Naroditsky does not look too happy. And that's understandable. This position is very, very close to resignable. Of course, you're going to play on in bullet, but that pawn on b7 and rook d8 check ideas are coming in. Maybe another check on b4. White just needs to coordinate. He offers a queen exchange. Of course, Black is always going to decline that. Queen back, queen d1. Black has to keep declining, but the problem is your knight, you're down in exchange. This knight is incredibly passive. a3 to kill off these possibilities, and now we're going to see queen advance. Now if you check, I don't have to block, and sooner or later I'm just going to, keep on piling the pressure on this knight, which is completely out of the game. Magnus taking a different approach. He just wants to push the pawn, and his pawn is faster than Black's majority here. We could even see a quick resignation. That's a full rook, and there we go, the resignation. Magnus crushing advantage. That's a 3-point gap already after 4 games.
Huge, absolutely huge. We'll try and get even more of Magnus's face, the full Magnus experience, and they are off a huge lead for Magnus, 3.5 half.
Yeah, and Naroditsky, he absolutely needs to get off the get off the mark here. He needs a win, and he needs it fast against the world champion. Yeah. But I like Black's play here already. Black has an extra pawn in the center. That's usually useful, and a bunch of pressure. White already having to react. 95, beautiful combination. The point is you give up a piece, but the bishop on d3 falls. Bishop g5 striking back, looking to collect this. Now, the material is actually level, but the position I think is really, really nice for Black. The bishop tends to be a little bit better in these positions where there are pawns on both sides of the board. King f7 defending the pawn, rook e8 defending again. White does have a huge trump in this pawn. Bishop h6, a really, really nice move. Knight f4. You might be tempted by some sacrificial ideas. He goes in a different direction. Knight e5, by the way, so there is no threat of capturing this pawn. Maybe knight e5 check, and now knight d7 check. King goes back. And maybe some knight c5 ideas here, some little trickery. c7, the point is if you take c8 queen, well, Naroditsky has managed to actually trick the world champion, and he is rook h6 check was even an idea there. He goes in a different direction, rook d7, king g2, Naroditsky is up in exchange, and this is the game. And wait a second, he's up a full... Magnus forgot, yes. Magnus seems to have forgotten about his piece, and just at that moment, well... we have a match on our hands.
We do.
It's very, very scary, but knight f6 surprises me. You can take, maybe drop the bishop back to f8. Now we understand, or rather I understand Carlsen's idea. I think he understood from the start, right? But can Naroditsky castle? He cannot. This queen is very, very annoying. You might want to kick out the queen. Instead, he reinforces the knight, puts pressure on c2. That's a really nice move because he might even bring the queen back, and now he can castle, but Magnus is attacked.
I would be very scared castling into this, but I guess the king couldn't stay in the center.
Yeah, what else to do? e4, I really like this. Giving up a pawn. The idea is to bring the knight to e5, but you have to be careful. You're not up that much material because white has a few pawns for that. The rook on f1 here. The bishop is hanging, so you do have to exchange the queens. The knight comes to e3, knight f5. This is great play from Naroditsky. We might see more pieces, and the pawn on f6 drops, going after this pawn on b5. You can even take it because of the threat back rank mate.
And Magnus resigns immediately.
Amazing
That was
game.
super nice tactic. And Daniel pulls another one back. Now just 1 point behind, and he has the white pieces, and we have a match on our hands.
This is huge. It's a potential equalizer. But of course, it's Magnus Carlsen. You cannot take anything for granted. And Magnus has shown time and time again that when the pressure is on, he is incredible. And has he tricked Naroditsky? I think he might have, because knight c5 hits the queen, and now b5, or first d3 he goes for, but I'm thinking, b5 is not possible because knight takes bishop, does come with check. Now he wins this rook. So in fact, it seems to be Naroditsky. I mean, I have no idea. This is just such high-level bullet. But it seems to be that Naroditsky is in all right shape here, or is he not? Rook h3, trying to just support here. What is the material balance? It's been such a crazy game in this one in particular. Knight e4, these knights, monsters here. Although you can't take them, that's a huge one for Naroditsky. And in the end, the dust is settled. Naroditsky is up a piece against the world champion. And I think this position is objectively winning. And Magnus doesn't even try. It's
Magnus
3.5.
is not happy. You didn't see his reaction, but he's not happy. The match is tied.
I mean,
what a comeback from Daniel. The first game was a draw. Then Magnus wins 3 in a row. And Daniel says, I don't care, and puts 3 back. Simply astonishing.
Daniel showing the level that allowed him to just completely demolish Alireza Firouzja in the previous round, and he's back in it. e6, by the way, not possible. Bishop takes e6. There is an x-ray. Knight g5. Magnus wants revenge here in this game, and it looks like he's going to get it. Bishop h6, exploiting this pin. Bishop takes g5, getting rid of this piece. However, you still have to defend against this threat. That's done. e6 came with check. That's why knight g7. Knight b6, a crushing move, hitting the rook. And the point is, e takes d7 is also coming. That's going to cost you a piece. Naroditsky resigns. 18-move victory for the world champion.
4.5, 3.5. Magnus takes the lead again. Sip of water. Didn't see what that was. And both players, actually, look at their... They had the same exact thinking pose. Anyway, back to the action.
We've got another Spanish on the board. These are positions you cannot castle, by the way. These are positions where Magnus excels at, but so does Naroditsky. That's why we're just getting them time and time again. Very classical positions. Magnus's position seems to be all right, but so does White's. Wait a second, this pawn drops with check. That's huge, but now you have 2 problems to face. Your bishop is hanging, and your queen is hanging against this threat, and maybe Naroditsky did not see this. He may have been tricked. If he moves his queen, he's going to lose the bishop. He supports, he gives up on that bishop, and his hope is an attack against the somewhat vulnerable king. Here comes knight e6 check. That allows this exchange of the bishop. Usually that's a good thing because it strengthens this piece, but the main thing, wait a second, queen f7 check. That must have been missed by the world champion, and queen takes g7 here is on the cards, and queen takes g6 rather. The knight is hanging. I think Naroditsky is in control. Naroditsky is going to take this one down because you can take this piece. You can win this piece here on f5. It's just a free piece, and you cannot even exchange. Maybe, I don't know what we're going to see. We see rook takes. I'm a little bit surprised by that. That was an exchange sacrifice. The reason is the knight couldn't move. Bishop c2, defending the queen. Now you can move the knight. Maybe you will even see knight hg4. That would allow for an exchange for the queens. White says no. Naroditsky says your king is a lot less safe than mine, so I'm going to play h3 here. And, well, what do you want to do? Carlsen has gone into the tank, and that's a huge moment. I mean, now finally the queens come off the board, but he's picked up a pawn in the process. It's 6 pawns against 4, so that's bishop and 2 pawns against the rook. Nominally that's about equal, but black's rooks
the time situation is incredibly close as well.
Yeah, black's rooks, however, they're so strong, and this pawn is very annoying. So we can see that Naroditsky had to give up that pawn on f2 just to bring his king into attack, and he wants to get this pawn, but Carlsen is the one in control. The question is, will he be able to convert with such little time on the clock? There we go, we see it, that conversion, the queen, and Naroditsky resigns.
And Magnus now with it not only, and we see there I didn't see if it was a fist pump, but Magnus is pumped because he is just 1 point away from winning the first ever Katara International Chess Tournament, Bullet Edition.
And yeah, and Magnus playing again queen's pawn openings here. That's been sort of the call. e4, e5 positions as black. Queen's pawn as white. That's where I feel he must consider are his best chances in the vast amount of games that they played. They played almost 1,000 games against each other. And Magnus, as you say, 1 game away. His position looks great here. You have to be very careful if you take this, because there are knight f6 check ideas, unleashing this queen and the rook. Bishop d3 makes a lot of sense. You want h5, and black doesn't really want to play h5 himself because it would give this square. So we see that combination of the bishop and the pawn, and king h8, it's really not ideal. Knight f6, a huge move. If you take here, the point is your queen is hanging. Notice the power of x rage. You cannot take this knight. The pawn on g6 is going to fall, and you know, if you get a position like this, the knight on h4, knight takes g6, we could see some serious problems. But some tactics back from Naroditsky, who manages to get rid of the h-pawn. That's actually really a huge achievement for black, but it's cost him his queen side, and these two pawns are going to be monstrous. e6, a really nice blow. We see the structure, we see the bad structure, we see the king in trouble. e5, nice move, hitting the queen, hitting the rook. Now rook d1, going for the counterplay, but the dust has settled in this position, and white is up a pawn. He's only up a pawn. Thank God for Naroditsky that he was able to pick up this pawn on b2, because there are some chances, but well, Naroditsky will do well to hold a draw here. This pawn in knight and pawn endgames, these pawns are incredibly problematic. Knights are known for having real problems against the rook pawns, and we see Naroditsky, who wants to just exchange these two pawns, but a5, nice calculation. The point is, when you push a6, you cannot catch the pawn. So Naroditsky goes in a different direction. Knight f2, if you take this pawn, takes, there is no way, you cannot catch the pawn, and we see flag, and the world champion shows that he is number one once again.
Magnus Carlsen, we have our winner.
Magnus.
Okay, so let me see. We are going to join the call in a
back and forth, but if it's like